and welcome to the 5th episode of the Sentient Sky podcast. You are listening to the astrological forecast for August 2024. My name is Yvonne Wildheart.
And I'm Rebecca Holly. Welcome. Today is the 29th of July at 10:42 a.m. AEST, and we'll be looking at some of the big things that have happened in July, like the Mars-Uranus conjunction, some of the Pluto oppositions and the full moon conjunct Pluto, and some of the conversations that were happening with Chiron and the nodes. And then we're going to go through August, in which everything is happening. I don't have a list for you because everything is happening, and we need to do the invocation before we bring everything in. So buckle in, make yourselves comfortable.
And prepare for this wild ride that will be August 2024. So if you're feeling called to allow us to fully open up and receiving, I invite you to closing your eyes, taking a deep breath and bringing your shoulders up and back. And slowly breathe out and feel your spine straightening, feeling the connection to the ground, feeling your connection to above, and feeling yourself just breathing here, just feeling yourself in this body. And this is a practice you can do if you're feeling things getting a bit wild out there, just to come back to your body, come back to the earth, and come back to all that is. And I'll light our candle that's going to hold us through our forecast today and for the month of August. And as we spiral from the center of our being, the void space within our very cells in our earthly body, we open up to the ever-expanding portal of galactic wisdom, knowledge, and consciousness. We call for full illumination of our unique universal map, our imprint of time and space. We call the stars, the planets, and all the spaces in between to speak to us and through us with crystalline clarity. May this transmission of galactic proportions shift us through the veils, expanding us beyond the realms of infinite creation. May we feel safe and held as we transmit this cosmic coding through our earthly vessels in service to the greater good of all beings, as we deeply remember that we are galactic citizens, ever-evolving conduits of the cosmic matrix, fulfilling our soul's mission and our beloved Earth at this time. And so it is, and bless it be. Bless it be.
And so it is. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. As most of you probably know by now, all of our transits are based on Australian Eastern Standard Time. And to discern whether or not the planetary influences and transits that we're talking about are particularly important or relevant for you, keep in mind your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign in particular, or even just pick one of those and follow along and listen, and then choose to come back to the other ones and weave them in as well.
Yes. And remember that some of this may resonate and some of it may not. And there's an invitation just to be open and trust what you're feeling and what you're experiencing in this. And if you want to connect with us and share your experience, or if you have any questions, you can contact us through the Sentient Sky Patreon. And please bring your questions, bring your comments. We want to hear from you. And if you're called to, please subscribe, kept updated on what we're doing. If you're liking what you're seeing on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or anywhere where you're listening or seeing this, give us a thumbs up, share it amongst your community if you feel that the information here is important, and sit back and enjoy what will be August 2024.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we say, wow, this is a big one every time. And it always is, of course it is, but like this is era defining this month. And before we jump into that though, Yvonne, how was your July? How are you?
I'm good. July, I think I can just feel there's a lead up. Just to recap on what happened personally for me in July. So that Mars and Uranus conjunction, fuck, what a doozy that was. And for those, if you're looking and reflecting on the outside world or what was happening, like you think of so archetypally just spot on, and you think about what happened in America with Trump and that attempt at assassination, that was so just, you couldn't even make that up, of just how clear that showed up in all the charts, Trump's and the collective chart of that Mars and Uranus conjunction. I heard reports of accidents and people feeling angry but not really understanding why. Like, I heard that even on the kids' hockey field, one kid just goes, I'm feeling really angry this morning and I don't know why. And that was on the Mars and Uranus conjunction. It was just like, oh, yeah. And in the Temple of New Wheat study group, there was lots of reports of other people hearing that around. So it was very tangible and very spot on as to the energies. For me personally, it was falling in my 11th house, and my computer suddenly died. So thinking of electricity and Uranus and Saturn, but also that Mars for me, it's where my MC is, it's where my Chiron is as well. So it really hit the heart of, this was my work. You know, I use my computer for work, and how I connect to my computer at 11th house and my MC, which is my work. And it really was just, and I'm still sitting in that, like I'm still working that out, like a complete, the motherboard fried. So that's what happened there. But also for me too, that Capricorn full moon conjunct Pluto, Capricorn in my 7th house. Oh my God, I'm still feeling that as well, reverberating in like 7th house, these final endings of what happened in my 11th house, 7th house between 2009, which is when Pluto first went into, until now. And a lot of what it felt like, really, with Pluto there, just really deep, old emotional woundings and grief of how my red thread lineage does one-on-one relationships. And like, how do we hand our power over responsibility? Capricorn, Saturn in the 7th house. So just really disentangling myself from that and looking at why that is, and really going into the heart of it. And it feels like the final hurrah that Pluto's offering up in the next few months. So it's like, I feel like a prelude of what's to come, or what needs to be cleared in the final hurrah of that Pluto going back into Capricorn, so it doesn't get passed on to my children. So yeah, that was my July. Becky, how about you? What was your July like?
Yeah. Yeah, equally as destabilizing in some ways. I set myself on fire during the Mars Uranus conjunction. Thankfully, it was only for about 3 or 4 seconds, and I managed to flat myself out, and everything was fine. No injuries were had, no eyebrows were lost. But it was still just this absolutely literal version of a very sudden fire, like Uranus with the sudden unexpectedness, Mars bringing the heat. I was cooking and something fell out of the pan, and I went to reach it to scoop it back into the pan and forgot I had these really deep sleeves. I just went, woof, and my whole arm went up. So yeah, I can laugh about it now. I had a slight panic for about 24 hours after that. But yeah, that was intense. What I noticed though, for me, Leo is my 1st house, and earlier in the month, I had this really tangible sense of Mercury and Venus moving through my 1st house of self and body, and of the literalness of my incarnation in this life. Like, when planets move through your 1st house, it will often show up really obviously, like someone representing Venus will, you know, be apparent in your life, and you'll literally see it show up. And I found myself just having like so many moments of looking at my daughter and just feeling so in love with her, and just feeling and witnessing her and all of her beauty. And she's a very Venus ruled little human. She's Taurus rising with Venus and Libra. So she's just got Venus for days. And so for me, that Venus moving through my 1st house in Leo has been just filling my heart up with the beauty of my small human. And what's interesting too is that for me, natally, Venus is in my 5th house of children. So of course, when Venus enters the 1st house, you know, this connection with my daughter really expands and opens even more. And with Mercury there too, I really had I had a day of sitting and I had 3 hours to do some work, and I just typed and it flowed and it was effortless. And I haven't felt that for a while. So we've really enjoyed these transits through Leo. It was super tangible. And that was really nice in amongst a lot of the craziness that's been happening. And yeah, I really felt gentler mothering and self-talk, and just thinking about Mercury and Venus moving together, how Venus has that impact on that internal voice and that intellectual world, that really softened some of my more negative self-talk, especially with mothering, was really beautiful.
Oh my goodness. That sounds like such a balm.
It really, yeah, like, don't get me wrong, that's not everything that happened in July, but for the sake of the podcast, we don't want this to go on for 6 hours. But yeah, it felt really, really good to have this moment of reflecting that the sky is importing this real beauty as well, and that it's not just the buckle up rocking of everything else that's happening. And I guess, yeah, for our listeners and our viewers, I would encourage you to take real note of where your rising sign is, and give yourself permission to let those planets truly visit you every year, which they do roughly every 12 to 18 months for Mercury and Venus in particular. Like, really give yourself permission to really welcome them and see how they show up, and you'll get more out of it that way for sure.
Absolutely. Actually, something that I did hear on the Astrology Hub podcast, they were talking about when you're listening to, for example, this forecast, and you're hearing resonance with, maybe one particular transit more than other, maybe just invite that transit in instead of getting caught up in all the things that are happening. Just allow one particular transit that's calling to you in, and just focus on that for the month. And just see what happens, because it's all going to get triggered and all move around you anyway, because it is, it's a holographic, center that we're in here on this earth. So just maybe, if you're getting lost in all the details, and it's very Virgo, as we move into Virgo season, maybe just come back and go, actually, this transit that I'm hearing, I'm really hearing the call to sit with that a little bit more, and just focus on that, and just invite that into your life, and see what story that is telling you. Because as we're going to talk about in a minute, this month is a lot about the storytelling and the stories, because of the mercurial elements that we will now speak of.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that particularly this month, there are so many big things happening, and like they're all happening and colliding all at once. It's not a neat chopped up, now we're doing this and then we'll do that. It's just like all month long. So the invitation really is like, I don't think you could listen to it all at once, even if you wanted to. So like, just pick the thing that feels resonant and that's calling your attention. I think that is such a grounding, gentle way to move through big sky times like this. The only other thing that I really wanted to talk about in this little section here was the big tech outage that happened about a week or so ago. Should we share the chart for that?
Yeah, let's have a look at that chart.
Give me 2 seconds here and I'll open that up. But it was on the 26th of July, as I imagine most of you probably know. We had a tech end of days for about 24 hours. And what happened was a really, really big tech company that takes care of some of the biggest businesses, like banks, airports, that kind of thing, delivered a software update which sort of shut down pretty much any Windows PC that was connected to that software. And so part of what happened was that the shutdown required someone to be in front of it to fix it. So you couldn't fix it remotely. So you literally had to have like a tech person in front of the computer to reset it and reverse the problem that the update had brought. But like, astrologically, it's so on the nose as to be almost farcical and ridiculous, because what was happening in the sky at this time was we still had that Mars-Uranus conjunction, like it's separating. We can see Uranus in Taurus and Mars in Gemini. So we have a sign barrier and 7 degrees. So that was starting to pull away, but there's still the remnants of that heat and disruption. But the really fun part here is that we need to have a look at sneaky Mercury over here, who only hours before this moved into his domicile and exaltation, so his place of home and exaltation within hours of this moment, to be in a square with both Uranus and Mars. And so there's this square of within 4 degrees of Uranus and within 3 degrees of Mars. Mercury is also in its retrograde shadow at the moment. So it's treading over the ground that the retrograde is happening in at this time as well. And that was when a worldwide tech problem occurred, which had significant impacts and reach. Flights were grounded, people couldn't access their bank accounts, people couldn't pay for things. And there is like not a better signifier than a conversation between Uranus, Mercury, and Mars. And just thinking of Mercury in this position of power here, Mercury was really able to do some proper mischief while it had just all of its resources at its disposal in Virgo.
And Mercury is mischief making, it really is. And also, Mercury is also the messenger to the underworld. So, what deeper underlying things that were happening or were coming up for you at this time as well, because of that messenger element coming to the underworld and back again.
Absolutely. And I don't know about everybody else, but there was, there was really this moment of getting this little glimpse of like, what would happen if everything just stopped working? Like, what would happen if just suddenly there was some, irreversible effect on all these services that we rely on to go a certain way? And just thinking of Uranus in Taurus too, which is rethinking and reimagining in-person scenarios. Like in such a technologically advanced world, it's like catching up in person as a revolutionary act is a very Uranus in Taurus kind of thing. And the fact that it was calling for someone to be in front of the computer in their body fixing the problem instead of in this very like remote, mercurial, over the airwaves kind of thing, I think is a real reminder not to forget how important our bodies are, and those, the need for doing things in person with your hands, with the thing in front of you.
And maybe this is a glimpse as to what Uranus and Gemini is going to bring, because there was so much mercurial and that, that Mars and Jupiter in Mercury, Uranus is about to go in there, in the next couple of years. So it's going to bring sudden changes to that Mercury element as well. So who knows what that will bring later on in the future, but maybe this is sudden changes in that element that feels something to pay attention to, I think.
Absolutely. And even just considering that at this time, Mercury was not retrograde, but Mercury's going retrograde on the 5th of August. So this was within 8 days of that happening. So Mercury's really already traversing the terrain that it will be retrograde in. So this is actually just the beginning of this retrograde story. So it's also worth just keeping our ear to the ground, or maybe up to the sky more so with Mercury perhaps, or maybe not while retrograding, but I digress. Yeah, I think it's worth just keeping a little eye on where we rely on tech, and perhaps making sure that we have some good contingencies in place for that. Like just, keep some cash in your wallet for emergencies kind of thing. Because
back up all your data. That's coming from a direct experience. Back up your data. Make sure that you have your passwords. Make sure you have, maybe a physical hard drive that you're putting your important things in, that that you might be able to need access to one day because the cloud's down or your computer blows up and you can't find anything. So that just, it's like that deep listening that we're called here at these very poignant moments to go, pay attention. What is needed if this actually was long term or something like that that we needed access to. Yeah, it's been a big lesson for me this month, definitely.
Absolutely. Or even if some data gets corrupted, that happens all the time to people.
Mm-hmm.
Print out some photos, friends. Like print out some of your photos on the cloud. Like, not
Yeah.
to panic anybody either, but like Mercury hasn't even gone retrograde yet.
No.
And that retrograde will be bringing Mercury back into this same square with Uranus. So yeah, worth keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Right.
All right. So let's begin. Shall we begin?
Shall we begin? We shall begin.
So, um, we are going to begin with Venus square Uranus on the 2nd of August. And this is going exact at 11:10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And it's important just to mention before we start the specific transits that the beginning of this month shows up with Saturn and Jupiter within 4 degrees of a square. And so that doesn't happen till the 20th of August, but it's active here. So just before we launch into the Venus square Uranus, just remembering that that's an energy that is going to be an undertone this whole month as that comes to its peak. But yeah.
Yeah, and just knowing that, these 90-degree angles, and we've said this before about squares, it's something that's calling. There's a tension here that's coming together at this square point, these 90-degree angles, to put pressure on a situation. It's with Uranus here. Uranus is sudden changes. It is breakthrough moments. So whatever's coming up for Venus and Leo that she's been journeying with while she's been in Leo, there's something here that's calling for something to change, but because of this 90-degree angle, it's like this pressurized something waiting to bust open, bust through. And yeah, boy, I'm feeling that very tangibly at the moment with it in my second house of finances. So it's just really interesting, this breakthrough, but it doesn't come easily. It's this pressure that's building, and then all of a sudden it's sort of, especially with Uranus here, just goes. So it's like expect the unexpected in this area.
Very much so. And another way to imagine the way that a square aspect plays out is that unless that aspect is happening right on a sign barrier where there's different signs involved, it will always be signs of the same mode, of the same modality. So it will be 2 fixed signs or 2 mutable signs or 2 cardinal signs that are in that square. So yeah, with the exception of if it's very close to that like 0 or 29-degree mark. But here we have Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus squaring Venus at 26 degrees of Leo, and both those signs are fixed. And one of the ways to conceptualize that is that both those signs think they know the best way to do this. They both know the fixed way to hold their element and to move forward. And Taurus is going, no, I know how to move forward with this. We need to be practical. We need to go one step at a time. We need to think about how we're resourced, and we need to make sure that we're comfortable and that we have new Ugg boots so that we can do that in comfort and all of that at the same time. And then we have fixed fire with Leo, which is like, no. What we need to do is tend the fire and keep that burning and make sure that brightness and that light and that warmth is there so that they both have this idea of how to do the same thing. They're kind of both telling each other how to suck eggs. And so there's a real tension there of wanting to do it their own way. And that happens whether it's cardinal, fixed or mutable, but probably particularly with the fixed signs because they're already really stubborn. So that is where part of the tension comes from, is from both planets telling each other the better way to move forward and do a thing.
Yeah. And, to make it more personable for you, have a look where Leo is falling in your natal chart and have a look where Taurus is falling, because that'll be the areas that this pressurized, moment of, just feeling that tension is going to fall in. So, and you'll know it already, it's already been building, but to make note of this as it comes into the 2nd of August.
Yeah, very much so. I think that, you know, like Venus being the planet of beauty and relationships and harmony and the way that we relate, and then Uranus being sudden unexpected events or change, or things just not being the status quo, like things just being left of center, things being radical or revolutionary. You know, sometimes that tension can be between Uranus and Venus is asking us to break through what we think we need for harmony. And actually, is it something we never imagined? Like, is there something that you think is going to make you deeply uncomfortable that is actually needed to support a relationship? And again, those fixed signs, you know, Taurus and Leo can have a really set sense of what it is that makes them comfortable, at ease, and easy to relate with each other. And so it could be that, you know, the rug's being a little bit shook underneath to shake up our sense of what it is we actually need to be in loving relationships.
Wow. I'm already feeling that. Considering it's only a couple of days away from when we're recording this, I really am feeling that building.
Yeah,
I was
as I
just
was
like,
listening
oh,
to you
yes.
talk about it, I was like, oh, that's what that's about. I can see, I'll talk about it in the review next month, pending what happens, but I can already feel what that's doing as well. Shall we look at the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so our next moment to look at is the new moon in Leo on the 4th of August at 9:14 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
So new moon in Leo, again, coming back to what Becky just said, you know, falling in this fixed fire, this new beginning, knowing that this is a beginning of the next 4 weeks. So this is planting a seed at 12 degrees. So it's something that we already are aware of. It's sort of falling, it's in the middle decan of Leo, but there's something here about keeping on going. It's not new information. We're not sort of there at the finish line yet, but you know, we're really needing to, it feels like a digging deep moment of just putting more fuel on the fire. I'm just thinking of Leo and that fixed fire that needs, you know, if you've got a fire at home in the middle of winter, you've got to get up probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. If you've got a really good heater, it's a whole different story. But you've got to make sure and plan that you've got a big piece of wood, or you're putting wood and feeding it. It's like feeding the fire, because otherwise it just burns out. So this is the moment where we're sort of, you know, bringing in something new, but it feels like something that keeps the fires burning long term, because it is that fixed fire sign.
Very much so. And, you know, for those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, there's a new moon in Leo this time every year. And so there's an opportunity at this time, and you know, we'll talk about Imbolc in a moment, but there's an opportunity at this time to reflect on how we tend the hearths, the hearth places in our lives. How do we tend those places that nourish us and warm us and restore our sense of light, restore our sense of vitality and well-being? Like Leo, it's the heart. It's the hearth, but it's also the heart. It's the beating center of any given thing. It's the center of the signs of the zodiac, but in medical astrology, it also rules the literal heart as well. So this is really a time to lean into the dreaming of what's being seeded at this time of year every year, to support that beating heart. And like Yvonne said too, like from that fixed fire perspective, it's the maintaining and the holding. So it's like what can be built upon what is already there that may not be ready for a full review or change yet, but like what needs to be stoked and built here, also to see us through the rest of the year to the cold time next year as well.
Yeah. And just looking at this too, there is a sextile here between Jupiter. It's actually falling in between sort of Mars and Jupiter here in Gemini. So there's something seeding here too between this mutable air element of in your chart of Gemini and this fixed fire. It's just like I'm just thinking of sort of like how much breath are you pushing into the fire to expand it and to keep it going. It's like that dragon breath of, you're really pushing it, or you're sort of, there's a wafting air, or on the heater is the full flue open so all the draft can move in, or it's this movement of air through that fixed fire depends on how much it's burning. But this is the start of something seeding. So how are you starting the fire through the breath to keep maintaining the fixed fire of it all?
I love that. And think, imagining it in the story of this sextile that's happening here. The sun and moon have peaked in that sextile with Mars in the couple of days before this, and are coming into a sextile with Jupiter. So what's been a bit ouchy, or what conflict has arisen, or what sharp thing have we found that we can see now and that we can integrate in? And what wisdom and learning and information can we metabolize that into as a result? So because when they're moving away from an aspect, when an aspect has happened and it's still close, but they're separating and moving away from, it's still active, but usually the main punchline has been delivered, and you kind of know what that aspect is all about. And when planets are moving towards that conversation, so there's 3 degrees to go between sun, moon, and the sextile with Jupiter at 15 degrees. So that story is almost arisen there. You're just waiting a few more minutes for the next scene in the movie to come in and deliver that punchline of, oh, that's what that conversation is about. So this is a beautiful moment to take whatever Mars is bringing you in the area of your life in Gemini, and to metabolize that into deeper knowing and wisdom, and through sacred truth with Jupiter.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see that this new moon is falling in, Jupiter's decan of Leo. So there's this coming in of Jupiter, of the expansion of how do we begin something that's going to set the tone for the next 4 weeks.
Very much so. And the co-presence of Venus is really sweet here too. And this is a month where the benefics are either benched and like not available to offer their support, or they're dealing with tricky stuff themselves. So there's not many moments this month where the benefics, Venus and Jupiter, have an opportunity to really offer their typical loving support. And so even though there is other stuff going on with Mars and things there, this is still a precious moment this month to lean into, of which there won't be many other opportunities through August.
Yeah. And speaking of that, too, the personal planets, this month has a lot of personal planets coexisting with the bigger outer planets as well. So whatever's happening on the outside world and the bigger picture of things it's also happening for us personally. It's that within us, without, above and below sort of feeling of it all. It's just like whatever you're seeing on the outside, there'll be a part of you, because of the personal planets sort of in squash in amongst all the sort of transit, the bigger planets, the bigger things that are happening. It's sort of coming back here to ourselves to ask, how does this show up in me? How does this show up in my psyche? How does this show up in my timeline? And I don't think, did we go through the main themes for this month?
I actually thought that myself a moment ago. We didn't. So I'm glad that you picked up on that.
Yes. Well. So let's talk about that.
Yeah,
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So our key themes this month is that this month is all about plot maneuvering. Like it's all about the way the plot is shifting and changing, but it's kind of like watching something like Game of Thrones, where you're keeping track of like 8 different characters at different locations, and then suddenly things start to, all the different events are unfolding, and you're starting to go, oh, wow, that's what's happening. There's a real peaking and colliding of many stories all at once. And it is going to be simultaneously confusing and illuminating. So that's Yeah, the key themes are the plot maneuvering, many storylines peaking and colliding, but also this ongoing theme of profound but slowly unfolding change. And that's that point that Yvonne was making, that it's the combination of these bigger, slower outer planets that are just doing so much with all of the aspects and conversations they're having with each other and with the personal planets. And then the personal planets are having to receive that feedback and criticism and encouragement and bring that into this life and this incarnation and make the best of the story that is delivered through those bigger players.
And inertia.
And oh yeah, funny how I forgot. Yeah, very much feeling that, you know, inertia can be a result of that too. Like when you can kind of feel the world spinning around you, but you feel a bit stuck or a bit maybe unable to respond, but also just not knowing what the response is and kind of waiting for that rollicking, you know, I'm almost imagining like being on a boat, you know, and like just having to, you can't move because you're so busy moving with what is. You're so busy just trying not to fall over.
Yeah, and I think that's also another result of those outer planets sort of doing big things with the personal planets so close to these transits, and that's sort of the outside and the inside world sort of being really rocked and just trying to find our stable ground in that, but there really isn't any. So we've just got to, especially with, you know, Uranus and Taurus, I mean, there hasn't been stability here for a really long time now, but just, you know, it's like that. When things feel really upheaval, both within and without, what do we need to do? What are our resources to come back and lay on the earth, and that stillness to allow the storylines and everything to move around us? But are we going to buy into any of it, or just going, this is just of the times? Everything's been unveiled, uplifted, upheavaled, you know, just and just choosing a medicine tool that help. And you could have several in your back pocket, whether it be lying on the earth, spending time out in the forest, or having your tinctures, lighting a candle and saying a prayer, you know, these coming back to these simplistic tools, or, you know, things that we have in our back pocket to help us come back to our own center and our own and I guess this is what we say, you know, choosing your storyline, choosing your timeline in this, and just keep reaching for, okay, so yep, that's this feels really, you know, and the need to disassociate, you know, especially with that Neptune now in retrograde, and, you know, detach from everything and just sort of, but I think the call is to hear, to move through it in one piece, or, you know, maybe not one piece is probably not the right word, but feeling, you know, come back to whatever's ground you here. Feels like a really good knowing of what are your tools coming into August, and not just August, I feel for the rest of the year. Just to go, okay, get really good at knowing what your body needs, whether it needs rest, whether it needs, you know, as we said, but coming back to that simplicity that brings you back into your own center, because things are not centered anywhere at the moment. So, you know, breath is really good, sleep is really good, forest is really good, earth is really good, you know, just coming back to having those tools in your back pocket.
So important. And I think that there's it makes me think of how Uranus in Taurus is really an opportunity to leave into revolutionary self-love and like radical self-care. Uranus really busting our original sense of what that is and what we need. And I think particularly for those of us in the West who have been indoctrinated to give and consume, and to put ourselves last and to wear the mask of, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm busy, you know, like whatever it is. And I think Uranus in Taurus is reminding us that our body has needs, and part of those needs is pleasure and comfort and softness and love, all those Venus in Taurus beautiful things. Like we all need rolling hills in our life. And unfortunately, many of us are at a point where it takes radical thinking and radical breaking free of old stories and patterns and beliefs, and of generational beliefs too, of how we are allowed or not allowed to take care of ourselves. Uranus in Taurus actually really offers a reworking of that. And so maybe that's part of the Uranus-Venus square we were talking about of a couple of days ago too, of reimagining and reprioritizing what we need to be well. And what a potent seed to be planting at this Leo new moon, because Leo is so much the self. It's so much about centering ourselves, you know, and remembering to, like, Leo is one of 12. We don't center ourselves every minute of every single day, but there is a time and a place where we must center ourselves, and we must remember our beating heart and come back to what is needed to support that. And I think that, yeah, there's a real opportunity. I can hear the call and what we're both talking about, to reimagine how we can be well, so that we can keep showing up to these difficult times and these turbulent circumstances.
Yeah, and this, like, as we said at the beginning, you know, picking a transit and watching it unfold, maybe this Leo new moon might be one of those transits that you go, actually, I'm going to sit with this Leo new moon for the whole month and see how it unfolds, and just keep coming back with that Venus there, 29 degrees. Like, she's a mastery now at this Leo point. You know, she's at the end of just going, oh yeah, I'm bringing my beauty and my warmth, you know, knowing that Leo is ruled by the sun. How do I shine in the beauty that is Venus for the whole month, and just allowing her to speak to you in that? That feels really like a really nice thing to focus on when everything else is.
Do you know what? I was actually thinking, for our lovely patrons who support us through the subscription and the tiers, Yvonne has her beautiful transit workbooks, and I offer an electional chart each month. And I looked at this month, I was like, what moment am I going to pick to lean into? And actually, I was going to pick a couple of smaller moments just with the moon, because the moon is about those rhythms. Like, the moon is always, you know, it's the change that you can predict exactly, and the way that she moves in her cycle and through her rhythms. And when all else fails, it's the rhythm of your heartbeat. It's the rhythm of your breath. It's the rhythm of the heartbeat of the earth. Like, really feeling coming back to that. And so I think just following the moon day by day or week by week, even just following those key points in, you know, the 4-direction cycle, would be a beautiful way of standing grounded in an otherwise turbulent month.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just also just something that's not shown on this chart at this new moon as well. What we can't see is that there is a yard happening here between so yard is like a finger of God. It's like, this is a quincunx, this 150-degree aspect between Venus and Pluto here, 150-degree aspect between Venus and Neptune, but there's a sextile here beginning. So there's a focus point here on this Venus as well, of something destiny, or something that's been, can't quite see it, but there's something beginning. But it's like this fated point that Venus in Leo is showing us, that we can't quite see yet, but it's here and it's underlying, but it's something that's driving us that we can't see. So that's really interesting too, that just given that we just spoke about, like, coming back to what gives you beauty, what lights you up, you know, in all this. And the need to maybe need to detach from certain, you know, that Neptune in retrograde, you know, Pluto at the 0 degrees in retrograde, also heading back into Capricorn, is coming back to that beauty of that, your light, and how you shine that light, because of that focus is at that point of Venus in that yard point. Yeah, and there's something here there.
I love that so much. I love that. And just as a final little remark, Venus's last retrograde last year was in Leo. And I think we talked about that a little bit last episode, so I won't go into it. But this really is a reignition of that Venusian self-expression and light. Last time Venus was in Leo, she did some real deep work here. She did some real soul searching within the themes of Leo and the heart. And now here she is putting that into practice. And so that makes so much sense that she's woven in to this moment. And truthfully, from here on, Venus is in some strife this month in Virgo. There's some tricky things happening this month that we'll talk about later. So this is a really precious moment of leaning into the gift and the Venusian resources before she's going to need them for herself in the rest of her journey this month.
Yeah. And also this is the first time we get to see Venus as an evening star as well after her Cazimi a few months back. So, you know, this is now where she is compared to the sun. You know, the sun will be like setting and you'll be able to see her just after sunset in the west. So that's really something special as well after her big journey, you know, coming after a retrograde that happened here and then coming out, and it's like, oh, she's coming out as a mature Venus, of someone who has wisdom and knowledge, and you know, she's like, now she's coming and showing up in the darkness in her bright light, which again just feels, I can just feel that, you know, that quincunx back to Pluto here, and just like, she's traversed so much, and look, she's still shining in the darkness with this wisdom and knowledge that she comes back into herself, or, you know, Leo shining her light. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, she's really meeting the challenges with confidence, isn't she? Like it's tricky, but she's not like weeping under the covers.
No.
You know what I mean? Like she's very much a mature veteran version of herself at this point, like really moving through any sort of challenge with great grace, I think, and maturity. And that feels like real medicine for everyone at this time. Is just to come back as much as we can into our knowing and into trusting what we need and trusting what our body and our sense of self-expression is telling us.
Yeah, which, you know, good to hold as we journey over the next month. As you said, Becky, you know, Venus, you know, she gets hit a lot by the bigger transits. So just knowing that she's actually a mature Venus she knows her tools, she knows herself, that she can come to it and face it. It really feels like a bit of Athena energy, a little bit just like, yeah, I know this, I can move through it with confidence, and, you know, because she has that maturity behind her.
Yeah, very much so. Gosh, this is actually a really important moon. It's an important lunation.
Yeah, it feels, well, it's the setup, isn't it? Like, it's the setup for the next 4 weeks. And as we will see as we talk more, the next 4 weeks is a big 4 weeks. So this feels like a good, the setup. So to come back to find out where Leo falls in your chart, and to make some really big, solid new moon prayers around this time that's going to set you up for the next month to enable you to shine your light no matter what is happening. Yeah,
very much so. Should we take a little break here?
Yes, we should.
Yeah, we'll take a little break and we'll be back shortly. We are back from our week-long intermission. There have been costume changes and all kinds of things unfolding this week. And it is now Monday, the 5th of August at 10 a.m. We haven't done it intentionally, but we are like fitting this in right before Mercury stations retrograde in 4 hours. So here we go.
And right on the new moon too. So we finished off, not that it matters to you all, because it's all just going to seem very streamlined, but for us, we finished off talking about the Leo new moon, and we just wanted to come back to it because we are now in the Leo new moon. Like, here we are. But what we wanted to bring your attention to that we didn't talk about is how Venus, and we spent a lot of time talking about Venus before, is actually sitting on the fixed star Regulus. Now, this is a very powerful position for Venus in Leo, this final mastery degree. And Regulus, this fixed star, is all about this power and leadership and great success. It's like this, it's the little king that's sitting up there who's done the work, who's moved through, and she's just shining her bright light here. And if you see her in the sky just after sunset, you can see here she's out of the rays of the sun now. Like, you can see her and she's so bright. And then you can also see Mercury just above her. So if you're in the southern hemisphere, especially at the moment, or probably all over the world actually, if you look over to the west, just after sunset on a clear night, you will see Venus and Mercury just above her. It's such a glorious position for Venus to be in. So powerful, so good.
It's so beautiful. And Regulus it's about power, but it's also about right use of power in particular. Regulus exalts and uplifts its children into positions of great power and makes them great leaders with access to resources and things like that. But Regulus will also punish those who don't hold to right use of power and who don't wield their immense gifts for the greater good. And I love this mature evening star Venus having this opportunity to be sitting in that place of power, which, she would do once roughly every 18 months. It's a really lovely moment for remembering what we're doing it all for, and to really check how we use our resources and how we influence others and how we connect with our own power.
So good. And this, in leading up, as we spoke about a bit earlier too, how Venus in early September will meet up with Black Moon Lilith on the South Node in Libra. So this feels like she's gathering information, ready to have a chat to Black Moon Lilith, who is all about equality and balance, especially in Libra. Wild feminine in her power, but everybody's got a piece of the pie. It just feels like this information gathering to take with her, and as she journeys through Virgo, will be like organizing her facts and her ideas and what she needs to do, and then comes into that conjunction with the South Node and Black Moon Lilith and Libra in the first week of September, which will be quite big actually.
Yeah, it's a really important moment for Virgo. It's an important moment for Venus because her travels through Virgo are not so well supported. So this is a really important gathering of her power before she makes that journey.
And on a new moon too. So this is the time, set intentions. What do you want for this Venus now before she goes through her journey in Virgo? So make a wish.
And holding that bigger prayer for what could happen in the world if the seats of power had more influence from a Venusian harmonizing, beautifying, mothering perspective. I know that by the time most of you listen to this new moon will be finished, but we can still tap into that and think about what we were doing around the 4th, 5th, and 6th of August, and we can still use this lunation as a whole to really pour our prayers in to what a better, more beautiful place this world would be if the mature feminine, in whatever bodied, gendered form, had more places and seats of power.
Beautiful. Okay, shall we move on?
Yes, so our next sky moment, which is happening at 2:57 p.m. AEST on the 5th of August, which for us is today, is Mercury's retrograde station. So Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde at 4 degrees and 6 minutes of Virgo at about 3 p.m. on August the 5th.
And Mercury, like all retrogrades, is all about it's when the planets are closest to the Earth, and so it has this optical illusion of, it seems like it's going backwards through the sky. So in the charts, how that reads, it's actually now moving clockwise as opposed to anti-clockwise. So now Mercury is moving back towards the sun that way. And retrogrades, Mercury retrogrades, you know, you think, what does Mercury represent? It's communication, it's information, it's cognitive processes and how we think. It's really interesting that Mercury is also the messenger, the God messenger through to the underworld and back. It brings souls to the underworld and has them into the void and escorts them back up. And so this feels like, especially with this, it will move to have this movement with Pluto here, that there's a conversation here about going back. It feels like whatever you need to do here with Mercury in this period of time, go back and review whatever decisions were made in the shadow period, going back down and for transformation back through the void. And when it stations direct, which will be, I've got it here, the 29th of August, which will at 21 degrees of Leo, it will, that's Mercury coming back up from the underworld. So, you know, watch what information's coming up for review, watch what ideas that you need to re-look at and revisit, you know, all the RE words: revisit, revise, rewrite. You know, we started off this podcast, feels like ages ago now, but speaking about, you know, the stories and you know, the mythology that we all carry. So what stories or what mythology that's coming up for review now that needs to be rewritten? Like, even what's coming up for me is, you know, just concepts and ideas that how I thought things should be, but actually I just had to unhook myself from that idea and it changes everything. So it's really, really interesting with this Mercury going retrograde just before all the chaos that's going to happen mid-month. You know, this is like getting your, especially in Virgo, how it starts in Virgo, it's like getting your thoughts and processes, you know, in a line so you can find grounding for what's to come, I think.
Yeah, very much so. And Mercury has both rulership and exaltation in Virgo. So this is arguably the most, if not one of the most resourced and comfy places for Mercury to be in. And to me, that speaks of a real willingness to do the editing and a real willingness to look at what needs to be looked at in that backward view of like the rear view mirror, and having turned around and starting now to traverse that old territory again. I think going through with it starting in Virgo, it feels like this real willingness to be like, right, okay, something isn't quite right here. Let's dig up the work that we've done and let's just get that done and figure out why this isn't working so that we can make it better and then be ready to turn around and move forward again. You know, like this retrograde is starting just after Venus ingresses into Virgo as well. So this is happening with Venus conjunct Mercury. So I think that there really is this sense of it ultimately being for the greater good, it ultimately being in the name of harmony. And so in this very early part of Mercury's retrograde, there'll be a Venus-Mercury conjunction, which is on the 8th of August, a couple of days later. And yeah, Virgo is all about the details. So don't be surprised if what it is you're editing or trying to find by retraversing that territory isn't some big, obnoxious, obvious thing. It's more needle in the haystack sort of looking. And so the need to use your very finely tuned mercurial discernment through this time will be necessary. And if you're wondering what might come up for you in this retrograde, then have a think about what has been coming up in this last 2 weeks while Mercury's been moving through its shadow, or this last week or so. And, you know, the shadow kicked off with our tech end days moment with the big global tech outage that happened. So also don't be surprised if there is just like random stuff that we depend on not working, because sometimes it's also just very mundane and literal of dropping your phone and the screen cracks, or not being able to hear any of the voice notes that get sent to you, or losing information on your computer. So this is the time to be backing things up and checking your backups, and also just remembering some of the more painful, literal, mundane things that a Mercury retrograde can bring as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too is trust in the process here, because you do have Venus and the moon's going to cross and it's in between the sun. I think there's something here that is calling us, even though the letting go or the rewriting of the stories or whatever is happening might feel really wobbly, especially in our current climate. But remember that, because Venus is here and the moon, like that feels like we're being called to trust this process because of the loveliness that is here, to calling us to something greater, I think, too.
Yeah, I agree. And there definitely is that feeling of preparing for the next thing, because what we also have happening is this is the closest that Mercury will be coming into a square with Mars for quite some time.
Cameo.
Hello, James.
We're recording. Thank you for the flower. Talk of Venus.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah, this is the closest that Mercury will be coming into this square with Mars, and there's a 6-degree separation there. So it's not super close and exact, but it's certainly close enough to feel the influence of Mars onto Mercury. And that square goes exact on the 6th of October. So we really are just getting this little glimpse of not fully feeling the martial aggravating aspect, but there being an undertone. And to me, that sounds like the call to go back and check something, like, did I leave something in the oven, or is the stove turned on when I thought it was off? Like, it's just really listening to those little warning senses that can come through, because they'll just be gentle and subtle, because it's not happening now, but there's something seeded here that will need our attention early October. And Mercury and Venus are really holding our hands to do this the beauty way, and to do this well, and to be prepared before something more difficult potentially comes up in early October.
Yeah, I think a good example of this, for example, Mercury is connected to travel as well, movement. And so if you're hearing some kind of noise in your car and you go, oh, I'll just keep going, or you just sort of forget it, probably go back and actually go and take it into the garage now to get checked, because if we don't, it could potentially fully blow up later on. So it's like that really, again, that Mercury going into the underworld is like all about listening. And so listening to the little calls that we're called to do, actually really listen to those little sort of thoughts that you just go, oh, I should really do that. Yeah, actually do it. Not just should, actually do it. I think this is what this is telling, because as we'll talk about as we go on the next month between now and December, it gets really chaotic, and you're probably already feeling that on this new moon. So listen to the call of Mercury now, who is guiding you to do something now before it blows up into something major. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that's such a good segue into the chart for Imbolc. And just while I'm opening that, I'll just share a small anecdote about listening to the call that I'm experiencing myself at the moment. I recently took 2 months off work, and 3 weeks before I did that, I heard a call. And if someone would have told me 4 weeks before that I was going to do that, I would have laughed and laughed. I was like, I can't take time off work. But anyway, I heard a call, I trusted it, and I took the time off. In the first 2 to 3 weeks of that time off, my whole family was sick, and I would not have been able to work for 3 weeks anyway. And then a week or two after that, a dear family member has landed in hospital, and I am very much showing up as part of his support, not just because I love him because he's my family, but I'm actually helping him make health decisions and things like that. And again, I would have just had to take weeks off work. And it's like just this niggling feeling of, I really need to do that thing. And I couldn't have told you completely why. Like, I needed a rest and all of that, but really trust when you hear those calls, because I was needed elsewhere. And I was lucky enough, and I guess tuned enough at this point in my life, to recognize that just that little niggling that wouldn't go away. And I'm really grateful I didn't ignore that. And I think that that is such a that's such an Imbolc type feeling too, you know, because Imbolc is the first like cross-quarter holiday that happens after winter solstice. And if winter solstice is the void and that dark new moon crossover moment, it's that place of life, death, life, then Imbolc is the very, very first breath of something else on the air, of life on the air after that moment. You know, so if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you're probably seeing the magnolias busting into flower and the beautiful wattle, which is always that symbol and that sign of bright light that's to come. And even though we can see those signs and we can almost taste spring coming, there's still winter yet to move through. And so sometimes those signs, they don't tell you what it's all going to look like, but they tell you what you need to do now to get there. And I think that's a really special Imbolc medicine.
Absolutely. And just thinking also there's buds on the trees, like there's promise here of something more to come, but there's a lot to go. Like there's a lot of growth to happen in between now and then. Also the goddess Bridget, so here in the Southern Hemisphere being Imbolc, Northern Hemisphere, it is Lamas, so the end of summer. Here in the Southern Hemisphere, Bridget, the goddess Bridget, is the matron goddess for Imbolc, and she's all about forging and creating. So this is the time, as Becky said, this is the first of 3 fertility festivals. This is the very beginning of spring. So if Earth is your calendar, if you follow the Earth calendar as opposed to a human-made Gregorian calendar, spring has started and there's evidence of that, but there's forging, there's creation to happen here. This is the equivalent to birth, you know, this is birthing, whether you're a birthing mother, you're birthing something new. And but it also, you know, there could be things from the previous cycle that are coming up to you know, to consider. Like, for example, if you're planting a seed, which is Imbolc is about planting seeds, you got to consider where the best soil is, and you know, does it require sun? And you know, if there's a plant that you planted last cycle that's not doing too well, now's the time to move it and consider putting it somewhere else so it gets more nourishment. So you know, especially in this Mercury retrograde, that consideration of something for the future that to be done now to provide nourishment. So when it comes the peak at summer solstice, there is a rich fertility energy really rising up because you've attended and done the things now in preparation for that.
Yeah, and so Imbolc in the Southern Hemisphere this year is at about 10 in the morning AEST on the 7th of August. And I feel to just say out loud that I would love to weave in the Indigenous seasons next time. Let's do that between now and our next forecast, and we'll weave in. I think that there's 7 seasons in Victoria and in Bunurong country where I am, and where you are in Dja country as well. So also just speaking that is something I can feel that needs to come in for next time. But in the meantime, season maps and cycle maps are season maps and cycle maps. So we can also weave them over and use them all over the world. There was something I really wanted to, and I think too, that while Imbolc carries so much hope and promise, sometimes we can still feel a little bit enmeshed and a bit sluggish and a bit unready to meet that. We might not yet feel connected to the hope, and that's okay too. Like, it's also okay to we still have a foot in that darkest part of the year. Like, we're not yet come around where the light is more dominant. So even though this is the time of thinking about what we want to connect with at summer solstice, it can also be a time of great melancholy because we haven't gotten much sunlight, our vitamin D is low, and because we're still emerging, and just giving full permission for that feeling as well. And that the hope is there when you're ready to connect with and fully receive of and partake of that. And that there's still plenty of time for that to rise up and wake up. And one of the ways of connecting with that can also be to start eating and connecting with the spring greens that are growing this time of year. So you've probably noticed the violets that are just putting on the most beautiful show at the moment. Like, spend some time with those precious late winter flowering plants, like we were saying, the wattle, the magnolia, the cherry blossoms, the violets. They will help thaw and melt those cold parts of us. And then the spring greens like chickweed and cleavers and nettles, they're so enlivening, and they get the fluids of the body moving and clearing, and they help to remove stagnation and sluggishness. And so connecting with those plants, whether the ones that are edible or to have them as a tea, or even just to go lay down in a patch of violets and do some good Imbolc dreaming. There's so much, there's so many ways to connect with this precious moment this time of year. The green world really puts on such a beautiful show between now and spring equinox.
That's so special. And just thinking of what you said about all the clearing and cleansing herbs, and looking at where Pluto is on the cusp of moving back into Capricorn for its final showdown, which I really think it's a showdown. And this is like the final hurrah of that cleansing of whatever happened, whatever started in late 2008 through to now. Have a look at the area of Capricorn in your chart, because Pluto's going to come back in here, and I can feel it within myself rising up, the final nails in the coffin of whatever the hell that was, to be finalized and cleared out, and trusting that. Trusting that void of the underworld to take you to those places to go, because you already know it, to clean it out in preparation for something new. So, it feels like such a big month. But, yeah, and looking to the herbal world and the earth realm to hold us through that and to support, and also that gratitude back is, when you pick the cleavers or the nettle, it's like thank you, and it will be responded back in the field as well as this lovely reciprocity.
Very much so. And, at the end of the day, we are earthly beings experiencing the cosmos through the literal cells and blood and bone of our body. And sometimes looking at all of this can really throw us out of our body, and we can feel really up in the sky and really in awe, and sometimes just really overwhelmed by everything moving above us. And that's such a beautiful way of coming back down and seeing this play out, seeing it in action through the green world. And remembering that cycle map is so valuable and important. And a last note about this Pluto coming back into Capricorn. When Pluto does that, even though it's only there for a couple of months, it edges into a trine with Uranus. And so, I think that whatever final nail Pluto has for its time in Capricorn, don't be surprised if there's like a spotlight and a flash of spirit fingers that you didn't expect, or some, big flash of lightning. I don't know. It could be a spotlight, could be a flash of lightning. Who knows? That it's Uranus, right? But I think just something is going to show you how done it is here. I think.
I can so feel the murmurs of that. I was listening to the Astrology podcast, the August episode, and I have to mention this for someone who has a lot of mutability in their chart. Austin Kopic said for August, especially those who have a lot of mutability signs. So Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius. If you've got a lot of planets and points in those areas of your chart, maybe best to nail your feet to the boards. And the way that we can do that is come back to the simplicity of the earth, come back to the herbs, come back to the body. Like, I've really found that helpful for me. I played hockey yesterday. I haven't played hockey since bloody uni, like 20 years ago. But it felt so good and so grounding, and I felt my body, and that is a sure thing, that coming back and being present to the here and now. And with Mercury in retrograde, it can be quite wild, all the tangents you go off because you're reviewing and looking and everything's coming up, and especially in Virgo because there's a lot to go on. And Venus in Virgo, it's just like, okay, where can I find that stability so I can find my grounding here when the whirlwinds of tornadoes are sort of ripping everything up and dismantling, and things are, revealing, and all the rest of it is just come back to the simplicity of, of our green world, and also, our bodies, and finding stillness somewhere in that, because these next few months are not still at all. The world, the scenery is collapsing.
I hear you. And the other thing just to quickly mention is that on the 8th of August at about 1:12 p.m., Mercury and Venus will meet and will be in conjunction. So essentially 24 hours later, we have that Mercury and Venus conjunction. And it feels to me like Venus, again, in her mature, powerful evening star form, is there to really hold Mercury and offer some truly sage advice about the rest of Mercury's retrograde underworld journey. And Mercury is just as versed in the underworld as Venus is. I mean, all of the planets are, but Mercury and Venus have a particular connection to the underworld through their mythologies. And so it feels really special to have these two planets meeting just after Mercury passes through that first gate. So I wonder what kind of loving words or loving thoughts, thinking of Venus in Virgo, that Virgo is so much about the intellect and the mind and data. What kind of loving words and thoughts can we hold to support our intentions and to support our journey of review at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. That feels like a really good thing to do.
Agreed. And I think the other thing to mention here is also like an hour later of this chart is that the Sun and Jupiter make a sextile, which is their first aspect since they were conjunct. And so there's so many stories unfolding all at once here. We've got the Sun-Jupiter cycle unfolding. There's a lot going on, but again, like there's just this little bit of support and holding in that sage wisdom. And like Jupiter is a little under duress at the moment with Mars so close, but he's trying his best. We're all doing our best, and maybe that's something worth remembering at this time as well, is we're all just doing our best. And so with that, shall we move on into the crunchy part of the month?
Yes, let's do this. Let's do this. So I've got the dogs barking. I'm just like on mute half the time. So we're just rolling with it because there's nothing I can do about it right now. And just being with it, I think this is a great symbolism of what is happening coming up. It's really interesting. I did the Temple of New Wheat circle the other day, and when we went through these charts as well. And as I was talking about all this, and as it went through around the Aquarius full moon, my screen just went black and it said nothing to see here. No one else could see it but me. And it was just so interesting of, oh, well, that just sums it up, I think. Nothing to see here. Just move on. It's okay. Nothing to see here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
it's so funny
how it shows up so literally like that sometimes. And so the next sky moment that we're looking at is when Mars conjoins Jupiter in Gemini at 16 degrees of Gemini, and that's happening on the 15th of August at almost 1:30 in the morning AEST. Gosh, there's just so much happening from here on out. So
this feels like a bookmark. This feels like, okay, this 15th of August. And as you can already see, the Jupiter and Mars here at 16 degrees, the moon here in Sagittarius at 15 degrees. Now you're starting to get a bit of a picture as the mutability, unstableness. Venus here at 11 degrees, and that Saturn here at 17 degrees. Like this is a mutable square cross, grand cross.
Yeah, and so what that means is that there is a planet squaring another planet all the way around in every one of the mutable signs. So when we have a square aspect, unless the planets are very, very close to a sign border, the square forms an aspects between other signs of the same mode. So they'll generally all be cardinal, all be mutable, or all be fixed. Or cardinal, fixed, and mutable if you're not a mutable person and like to go in order. And so in the middle decan of each of the mutable signs is a planet in a tense, hard aspect squaring another planet. And so and it's also like, yeah, it's not just one in each point. This is happening at the exact moment that Mars and Jupiter are conjunct, where the moon is like less, or maybe an hour and a half away from perfecting an opposition to those planets. And so when Mars and Jupiter come together, we can think of heroism, we can think of bold adventures and like big moves and activism, and of using your energy and passion for the greater good. But we can also see aggression being blown out because Jupiter is so big and so expansive. For better or worse, Jupiter expands and brings into the obvious whatever it touches. And so with that happening in Gemini, I wonder if there'll be something interesting that comes in through like information on social media, or if there's, just something big or conflict based that comes out in that realm of communication and dialogue and conversation. And particularly because this is an opposition with the moon, as we talk about, we know that the moon imports things into the real. And so when there is such a tight aspect happening between a major conjunction like this and the moon, we can be pretty guaranteed that we're going to see it or feel it or notice it showing up very literally in the world. And so what I invite each of you listening to do is to have a look at where Gemini is in your chart. What area of the life is Mars and Jupiter coming to meet here, which brings energy, assertion, aggression, a competitive spirit alongside a desire to grow and to understand and to implement sacred wisdom. And how do those things come together, again, for better or worse? And where in the life is that happening for you? And so for me, this is happening in my 11th house of groups and community, and also the world at large. So I'm going to be really careful of how I interact with social media at this time, because I may just be more sensitive to what I see over this week or this couple of days. But I'm also going to try and stay really mindful of how I communicate with my loved ones and how I communicate with groups such as my clients or at the community that I communicate with on Instagram. So I'm also going to be mindful of how I bring Mars Jupiter into the field, and make sure that if I feel like standing on a soapbox, that it's for a really good purpose and for a really good reason.
Absolutely. So for me, that Pisces and Virgo axis is in my 9th house and my 3rd house, with Sagittarius in my 6th house and Gemini in my 12th house. So it feels like being really discerning for me to be careful of what my thoughts are and what I say. And because if I just sort of go off on, unseen territory, that it would probably come back and really affect my daily life. So really be really careful of my deeper thinking, as well as, the everyday internal dialogue that's sort of going out, and how I speak to that. So I'll be very cautious about what I feel like I should just mute myself for a little while over this period of time, because I could just spurt out something that I didn't really think about too much or something like that, but really calling the invitation to be very careful about how I use my words, but also my thought patterns, because either way, it's going to affect me quite a lot. And also, the moon is sitting on my Mars. So being very careful that how that shows up in my everyday. So just knowing that what's above is below, is within is without. And that really feels like what, personally I have to be aware of over this mid-August period.
And so you'll be having a Mars return. So not a Mars return, a Mars opposition
Opposition,
at the same
yes.
time. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think like that's such an interesting comparison to make of when something is happening in those third, ninth, sixth, 12th houses. They're darker houses. They're shadowy houses. They're more in the background, and that doesn't make them less important or but it's sort of like, yeah, it's more like, how does the background programming influence your day to day, and how does that come through? And the answer is very strongly. It's no
Yes,
small
absolutely.
thing. But it may be something that doesn't feel so obvious and tangible in a way where you can go, oh, this is what I'm working with, so I'm going to do that. And, as Yvonne always says, such a call to trust the process and to lean into the sense of what needs to be done, rather than waiting for the perfect information that tells you what needs to be done, and just trusting that feeling body. Whereas, if you have a mutable rising sign, like if you are a Gemini, Virgo, Sag, or Pisces rising, this is happening in your key houses, in the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th. Then you might really feel that surging in a much more obvious way. And I think the last thing I want to mention here is that Mars also brings courage. This could also be a really important breakthrough moment, to have the courage to connect with something, or say something, or initiate, or just shake something up where that you've been needing to sort of stand up and speak something out loud. This could be the courage that you need to do that. And this grand square that's happening involves both the benefics and both the malefics. So it really truly is a mixed bag. And I think that sometimes, a lot of the time, we don't necessarily know what's perfectly right to do. And this is a real expression of that sense of, I don't know what's right, but like I can't, I know I'm not going to get this perfect, but, and like trusting that you're going to do your best anyway, and just using your best discernment that you possibly can with this moment, and trusting what feels loudest to you. And again, like the moon just importing all of these feelings all at once. It feels like a bit of a feeling the fear and doing it anyway kind of moment to me.
Yes, absolutely. And as we mentioned earlier, Uranus is really hitting its furthest point that it's been in this whole 82-year cycle. 27 degrees of Taurus, and it will station retrograde in September. But there's a trine happening here. There's changes happening between Pluto, in the Capricorn and Aquarius, early degrees of Aquarius parts your chart. There's changes happening in Taurus areas your chart, and you already know this, but it feels like it might be just getting louder as Pluto goes into retrograde, it goes into Capricorn. It's just really edging even more closer and closer to this shake up, this changing that's been happening as Uranus slows down.
And so, in case you were thinking that was all we had to say about this chart, let me open the next door that this chart invites us into, which is that the grand square is not the only major formation happening here. There is also a grand fire trine, which is less than 24 hours away from perfecting. And so again, the moon is involved, which is fascinating because the moon is actually holding the most sensitive points for both of these configurations to exist at all. The moon is calling this into being. Like, there is a reason why things are happening the way they are mid-month. And so we can see the sun in Leo at 22 degrees and Chiron in Aries at 23 degrees. That's a very, very tight trine. And over the course of the next 24 hours, the moon will move into that same 22, 23 degree point and will perfect that grand fire trine in Sagittarius there. And so the difference between a grand square, a grand cross, which is those square-based hard aspects we've been talking about. And a grand trine is that the cross is a very tense holding, like all the planets think they know how to do mutability better, you know? So Venus is like, I'm immutable Virgo, I'm immutable Virgo, and I know how to do this. And the moon goes, no, 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 no. I know how to do mutable better because I'm in Sagittarius. Follow me. I will show you how to do this. And Saturn goes, the only way to do mutability is the Pisces way. And so each of the planets is really like putting their heels down into the ground, feeling that they have the answer. And that's where all of the pulling and the tug of war and the tension happens. The difference between that and a grand trine aspect is that the trines are harmonious, supportive, highly creative aspects. And what's particularly special about this is that both of the luminaries are involved. So the two light bearers, the light bringers, are opening this portal of divine harmony and creativity, and of trying to lift up out of the tension of this is how we do the things. There is something to be seen, there is something to be witnessed, and there's something that they want us to connect with here that is also incorporating Chiron, and that it's the wounded healer, yes, but it's also the philosopher, the scholar, the wise man or woman, like the keeper of great and important knowledge and wisdom happening at the same time as the tension. And this chart, actually, almost every single planet is in a prominent aspect. In fact, I think that every planet is having a prominent aspect with another one, which weaves them all together somehow. Like every planet has something to say mid-August, and in a big way. It's like it makes me think of sitting a bit around a big round table and everybody talking at once and everybody having a better way to do things. And so I also feel myself like rambling and talking a lot and wondering if maybe the answer is just to listen at this time before we act as well.
Yeah, and I think the common thread in here with the Grand Cross and also the trine is the moon and Sagittarius. You know, it's in both of these big aspects. And so, you know, maybe the voice to listen to here is the moon in Sagittarius, when everything is loud and in your face and, blah, 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 and lots of conversations going on, lots of things happening. It's like, fuck, where do you turn your attention to? Maybe come back to the Sagittarius area of your chart and just sit there for a bit and just go, so what do I need to hear? Because you're getting all this information from different parties. what do you've got to say, moon and Sagittarius? You know, and it doesn't last for long, this moon. So, you know, this August the 15th, you know, sort of in the afternoon, is to come back and say, okay, where is the area of Sagittarius in your chart? Focus on that for a bit and see what that's telling you, and just listen to that. Yeah.
Very much so. And remembering that the moon is the great receiver of everything else that happens in the cosmos, and that the moon is very much a mirror of the body, and really trusting that, you know, if you get a sore foot, sit down. You know, if you get a headache, close the curtains, lie down. If you get the itch to go outside and pick some violets like I did on Friday, like go and do that. Like really listen to the language of the body and the impulse of the body, because the body organizes and prioritizes very, very well. And when everything feels overwhelmed, or there's a lot of information that is tricky to discern, remembering that Mercury is retrograde at this time. And so the clear path intellectually can feel a bit muddied or a bit unsure. The body knows. The body knows. And I think there's a reason why we keep on talking about the herbs and the gut and the digestion and the food and the body, is because that's what we come back to when everything else is crazy. If there's a crisis happening, everyone's still got to eat, right? Everybody's still got to sleep. Everyone's still got to drink water. Like just coming back to those things and allowing yourself to find true solace and peace from those simplicities. And I think trusting that that Sagittarian meaning making will come through the body when it's ready. That Sagittarius energy loves looking out over the horizon and being like, what could be over there? I should go and have a look, like be willing to really search and enjoy the process of figuring it out too, as to, you know, Sagittelliums. We can attest, I'm sure, that the journey is where all the magic happens. Don't get too caught up in what's coming next or where you think it needs to go. That is not what this moment is about. This moment is setting things up for the arrow to fly and loose, and for the journeys for us to be taken somewhere. We're not reaching the end here. We're in the thick of the mess of figuring it all out at this time. And so, yeah, also, you know, if you get the opportunity to not plan too much over this, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where these big configurations are coming into being, do that, you know, do as little as possible so you can listen. And as we said, that moon is holding the sensitive point here. So within 24 to 48 hours, both of those configurations fall away, because the moon is the critical point holding that all together and keeping everything in conversation.
I'm just loving this chart as well. It's so much, because another layer of the interconnection and interweaving just feels like the spider web. You've got the moon in its moon decan, you've got Venus in its Venus decan, you've got Mars in his decan, but also you've got Jupiter there. And so funny that you've got Saturn in Jupiter's decan, and you've got Chiron and Venus. Like it's just another indication of just how intertwined, interwoven all these conversations are connected with. And it's not just one thing, it's all of the things. Like it's just all of it coming in. And Venus in, Pluto in Venus second. It's beautiful. But also I think, you know, as you just said, I was speaking to my friend Natasha and was saying how maybe this is the time we just sit in the lounge room and get out our popcorn and just sing Kumbaya together. Like, you know? It's like, that sounds like a really good idea. Let's just do that over these, you know, from Wednesday through to Sunday. We'll just do that. And just witness, because there's no one thing that you could sort of hang your hat on, go for it, just be with that, and just take that Sagittarius moon here out and just go, whoa, wow, all that's happening down there. Okay.
Pack yourself a picnic, friends. Pack a picnic.
Yes.
Pack a picnic, go sit under a beautiful big tree and just enjoy watching the wind rustle and play with the plants around you. And you know, life all goes on. There's big moments, there's small ones. And I've been having a chaotic week. And on Friday, my daughter and I, we packed a picnic. We packed a picnic and went up to the hills and had a picnic and an explore and a forage. And despite feeling I had a million things I could and should do, it was the best medicine to just be so pulled into the present. And more than anything, that's all that's asked of us at any given time.
Absolutely.
And there's just like, we haven't even talked about everything happening in this chart yet, you know.
No.
I feel like, because Mercury is just about to dip out of Virgo and into Leo, into the next phase of its retrograde journey. And on the 16th of August, the next day at 3:15, I didn't write whether that was PM or AM, but sometime on the 16th of August, we have the opening Mars-Saturn square happening as well. So we can see already that Jupiter-Mars conjunction is squaring with Saturn, but that opening square in the Mars-Saturn cycle perfects the next day. Now, we had a chart to look at from April 11, from when Mars and Saturn were conjunct. Should we open that and have a little look to see how that cycle's been unfolding?
Which chart, sorry?
So with the Mars-Saturn cycle, we had the chart from Mars-Saturn conjunct. So let's open.
Yes, let's have a look at this.
There it is. So cast your minds back to mid-April, when all kinds of, and look look at how different this is. It's a whole
Oh.
different kind of craziness, is it not?
And that was crazy. That around the eclipse period was insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just felt like everything at once, but in a different way to what it feels now.
Yeah, it's like I think at this time it was the same narratives just like being repeated over and over and being stacked. Whereas what we're looking at in August is so many different stories competing for our attention and having to metabolize the that's a lotness of that. Whereas in April, it was like, that's a lot because it was just Aries, 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 and like just having to deal with that same vibe on very, very high volume. But at 14 degrees of Pisces here, mid-April, we had Saturn and Mars meet in the sky, which happens about like every 2.5, 3 years, I want to say. And so mid-August, when Mars is squaring Saturn, we're seeing the first tense aspect in that bigger 2.5 year cycle where there's a turning point, and Mars and Saturn are kind of got different ideas of how to move forward. And so if you think back to what was going on for you and what the seed of this story is, it will give you a heads up as to what stories or lessons or medicine is available in this point of tension, and will give you some hints as to how to reconcile that and move through it with as much ease as possible.
Mm. Yeah, that looks such a different chart.
So different, isn't
It's
it?
so different. It's like, what even was that?
And I think too, even just thinking about how the message here may have had a level of simplicity because of the difference of the chart, just remembering that the Mars-Saturn cycle is only one story competing for our attention, and it may be hard to differentiate what's happening there. But I really love that story unfolds alongside Jupiter. It's really for the greater good. I think that there really is this sense of trying so hard to make the best of a difficult circumstance. Like, even if the circumstance now can't be better, it's like, well, let's do the hard stuff now so that we don't have to do this again in the next cycle. And I'm really thinking in generational terms
Oh,
here too. Like, like what's happening in this 2.5, 3 year cycle that Jupiter is really willing to bow to and listen to and learn from, so that it can apply things differently over the coming years.
Yeah. And I think something that we spoke about, you can go into the next chart, but it's something that we spoke about in our July forecast with this Neptune here, and having a look at the planets that sort of are surrounding both Neptune and Mars. And when we go to the chart of the moment, back in the 15th of, like, in the next couple of days, 15th of August, you will see that there's that Neptune in the middle, so still so close, but look what's happening between. Like, Neptune, as we spoke about last time, is in this huge, massive cycle, generational cycle, that's a part of the conversation here. North Node, something from the future. Chiron, looking at the old pains and hurts for, to teach and do something different, and to heal those sore parts. Uranus changes, so that there's something here that is also not just for now, but it's for like greater generational change still occurring here, that's happening and unfolding because of who is situated in between this opening square.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing worth mentioning, which is another big thing, is that Jupiter is also preparing over this next few days to perfect its square with Saturn as well. So just looking to see. So the date for that is the 20th. So we've got a couple of other things to look at there, but that's been brewing in the background this whole time, of Jupiter moving into that square with Saturn. But I think, is there anything else to talk about with this chart?
Probably, but I think that's it for now. I think we might have to have another break before we go into the next segment, because Aquarius full moon and Jupiter and Saturn square feels like a huge conversation.
Yes.
So we'll be back for part 3. Not that it was going to matter to you all, but there may be costume changes and light changes and who knows what. But isn't this funny? I feel like we're embodying, as we're doing this, we're embodying what the month is going to be like. Mini costume changes, light changes, shifting. It's all good. It's very mutable, sort of focused. We're just going with it, just being with what is, busy mums and lives and things like that. But here we are, still showing up. And that's the thing. I think we're embodying what August is all about. All the things are shifting and changing and moving, and we're just being with, but we're still showing up. So there you go.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Back soon.
Back soon.
Hello. It is now Tuesday, the 6th of August. This is we're having a timeline unfolding, getting this episode recorded. It's 10:45 a.m. on the 6th of August on a Tuesday, and we are going to jump into talking about the Mercury Cazimi, which is Sun conjunct Mercury while Mercury is retrograde, which is happening on the 19th of August at noon for AEST.
Yeah, so this is this Cazimi. So Cazimi means when a planet goes into the heart of the sun. It really feels like Mercury here, who's in, so this is happening in Leo, as we said, which is a fixed fire sign. So it's something that is, to me, for Leo, ruled by the sun, it's like you have to keep fueling the fire for it to keep burning. If you don't, it's just going to fizzle out. So with Mercury here in the beams in the sun, it feels like Mercury completely disappears from, like it does. It actually literally is gone from the sky. We can't see it. And I just feel the energy of Mercury, who is the planet of communication and cognitive processes, and also the energy that moves souls to the underworld and back, has gone. It's like it's gone to the underworld now. It's completely disappeared from view. It's in the void through the rays of the sun here in Leo, which is ruled by the sun. So there's something here where communication is lost, or it just sort of, I don't know, things become unclear because there is no communication happening here. It's just sort of disappeared in the rays of the sun.
And so Mercury has a Cazimi 6 times a year too, because there'll be one that happens when it's retrograde, and Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year. So that's that. And then there'll be a Cazimi 3 more times while Mercury is moving forward. And so when we think of those messages from the underworld, and with that Leo component, it's like, what do we need to bring up from underneath that helps permission us to keep fueling our heart's desires and our heart's longing? Because Leo truly is the heart, and it rules the literal heart in the body as well too. So like what things are central, and how do we keep feeding that with our longing and our desire and our hope, and our creativity? Like, how do we keep that creative fire burning? And I think that something that I love thinking about is that Mercury is the planet that gets the most Cazimis. And like, I mean, I guess you could say that the moon does, but it's not really, we don't think of the moon and sun as being a Cazimi when it's a new moon. But in terms of the other planets, Mercury gets this reset more often than any other planet. And so that tells me something about the mind and the intellect and how we think and how we communicate, that if as above, so below, then we too need a bit of a defrag and a spring clean of the mind and the intellect several times a year, to reorient ourselves. And so this particular defrag is really centered around self-expression, our beliefs and thoughts around who we are and how we express ourselves, and also how we connect to our creativity. Are we someone who, are we not a creative person? And so like we don't do creative things. Like I think there's a real opportunity to connect with the fire of passion and of longing in that creative sense. And maybe with Mercury retrograde, we're looking at, what limiting beliefs do we have around what we're capable of? Because Leo is bold. and brave and says, I can do anything, and puts itself out in the light and is willing to do it badly and get up and give it another go. You know, there's a real enthusiasm with Leo, and especially in that fixed nature, to keep on coming back and to keep doing it, to keep perfecting it and making it better. And so with this being around the mind and the intellect, like, what has been hidden that maybe influences the way we do our creative process and the way that we allow our heart to speak and self-express or not? What do we shut down in our hearts that maybe really needs to be expressed and needs to come into the center?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is in the lead up to the full moon. So this is like not even, is it 24 hours away from the full moon? Not even 24 hours. So we've got the full moon happening over here at 27 degrees of Aquarius. So there's a full illumination of what it feels like, what stories, what thought processes, what neuron pathways of the heart, thinking of the Leo, needs to be burned away when you are seeing the full illumination of what's not working. when the stories are sort of coming up in full illumination that you don't want to see, like Mercury being hidden under the beams of the sun, but from the heart. So these heart stories. So this would be a really good time to, call in some prayers of be shown in gentle, make sure you put gentle in all your prayers. Is really important, because you don't want that shit to get rough, especially at mid-August. Please fully illuminate in gentle and transformative ways of the stories that hold me back from shining my light. The old pathways, the old thought patterns, the old beliefs, the things that hold me back from shining my light, to stepping fully into the heart space. And there's a lot going on in the lead up to this full moon and at the full moon. So this is just one of many stories. But I just wanted to also highlight at Australian Eastern Standard Time, this is happening at 12 with the ascendant. So what's on the eastern horizon over here, this is a really awkward E. That's meant to be east, by the way. So the sun is rising on that side, going up, and this is the west. On this side, this is where sun sets. If you're looking at from the sky up. So on the eastern horizon, what is actually rising is Sagittarius, 12 degrees Sagittarius. And the next Mercury retrograde that happens in Sagittarius in early November is happening around this 12-degree marker Sagittarius as well. So that's really interesting, just to take note of. This is not the end of the story, I think, for us here on this land. And just before we started, Becky and I were talking about how on Eastern Australian Standard Time as well, the MC, the mid-heaven, the fully illuminated what's above, for all to see. The Mercury retrograde and Mercury Cazimi, this is actually happening in the full aboveness of this land. And being in the ninth house, of higher education and long distance travel, we're talking about this potentially could be something from foreign lands affecting us here. So something about communication and hidden communication, but it's happening somewhere else, but that's been affected here to us here now. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. And I think the ninth house, it rules journeys of all kind, whether it's a literal journey overseas or down long roads, or whether it's the internal journeys of belief and values and philosophy and religion.
Shamanic journeys too. I've had that ninth house experience of shamanic journeying deep in shamanic worlds, beyond the realms.
Journeying of all kinds, exactly. And so that midheaven point is the peak of the sky, and for us within this time zone, and for others in nearby time zones too, like it will still be in a prominent place, seen above us all. There's a lot of other things happening in this chart, and as Yvonne said, the full moon is a half a day away, but this Cazimi is perfecting itself literally right above our heads. And so I think that there's a particularly deep invitation there for those of us living within that time zone, to really connect with the themes that we were talking about earlier. And when I think of Leo and the ninth house together, it really is like your most passionate beliefs, and where can we have the empathy and compassion and the willingness to review those, and to not have it become a zealous, concrete sense of what's right or wrong. Like, can we step into our hearts and seek deeper truth in that ninth house way around how what we think informs our beliefs, and is that all still true for us?
Yeah.
And this is very tightly squaring Uranus over in Taurus at 27 degrees of Taurus. So that's within about a half a degree. There's a Uranian square happening to this as well. So I think that there's a real opportunity to really shake some things up there, like really shake some foundations of beliefs for better or worse. But I think that if you really come with your whole heart and the willingness to truly see what's there, that you'll make the best out of that. And that, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad. I think that that could be a real like key for some of the transits happening here.
Yeah. And this is the second of three Mercury and Uranus squares that have happened over, during this little period. We had one sort of late July, one now here on the 19th of August, and then we'll have another one later on. I don't have the dates, I'm sorry. I think it's sort of late September, something like that. So this is not a new unfolding. So we already have some information on what this could possibly be about. So this is a middle out of the three squares. So it's like, okay, I know this terrain. I know what this is about. Let's sit in a little bit more. Let's dive into a little bit more. Let's see what's shifted now compared to what it was at the end of July. And the last square, it will be like a mastery point of going, oh, okay, it's done, it's moving, and it can move on. So this is like a middle of the road, middle of the story sort of moment of just going, okay, what needs to change again after this happened the first time, second time, and then the third time, and it'd be the final shift and change.
Yeah, the first Mercury Uranus square was the 22nd of July.
Yeah.
And this is the second one. And then the third one will be the 7th of September.
7th of September.
Yeah. So yeah, really like we're starting to recognize the movement that is that Uranus Mercury square.
Yeah.
It makes me think of being on a ship, and not feeling so seasick anymore, and getting the hang of how the floor moves beneath you, and surrendering to the movement with it, because you can't change the movement of the sea, but you can change how you respond to the movement of the sea, and move your body with that.
You learn how to surf well. Was that first that first square, was that when that outage was of the internet?
That was a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that they were I think that there was a little bit of a separation there, and Mars was a little bit more involved, but yes, that was a part of that was within orb of that first square for sure.
Yeah, and Mars is involved here because it's happening in Mars's decan in Leo, which is interesting as well.
And the other thing that's worth mentioning here too is we've got a T-square happening, which we've already talked about in mid-month when we were talking about the mutable grand cross, because we had over here where the ascendant is now in this chart, the moon was here creating that grand square, and because the moon has moved on and there's no other planet to hold that fourth point, what we have instead is called a T-square. So it's just missing that one point from what we were talking about earlier, but this T-square is quite significant because the planets involved are so in such a perfected tight orb to each other. This is as tense as this aspect is going to get at this moment. And we can see that with Venus at 17 degrees and 9 minutes in Virgo, almost perfectly opposing Saturn at 17 degrees and 30 minutes. So there's 11 minutes difference in that opposition. That's perfect. And we also have Jupiter over at Gemini. Oh my God, my words. We have Jupiter
Exactly. I think this is exactly what it is. It's a Mercury Cazimi. You can't see it. So the words are muddled. It's a little bit confusing. Like,
oh my goodness. Anyway, there's a T-square, and yeah, it's within 11 minutes. That's shockingly tight and tense.
yeah.
And so it holds the same significations of what we were talking about for the Grand Cross. But in this one, we're particularly seeing Venus pull on that tension because she's come in to that very perfected opposition with Saturn. And what's interesting too is that Saturn is in Venus's exaltation territory over the other side there. In Hellenistic and more ancient forms of astrology, the relationship between Venus and Saturn is really interesting because where Venus can feel a bit weighed down by Saturn and sort of like Saturn's a bit of a stick in the mud, and Saturn doesn't always gel with Venus, but Saturn really benefits from Venus's influence, where Saturn can be maybe, just more gently harmonized, and maybe they can put some classical music on in the background while they do the hard labor. Like Saturn benefits from the beauty and nourishment that Venus brings. And so an opposition like this can really bring tension around our Venusian hopes, where the Saturn restriction or sense of responsibility is kind of pulling the other way, and we can feel like we have to choose between what we want to do and what we love to do and what we have to do. But I think the key with these oppositions is always to find a way to integrate both. So I think that this is going to be another potentially tense or chaotic sky moment in which maybe we can put Beethoven's Six on in the background while we run around like lunatics and also have a giggle at ourselves while we do it. But yeah, there's quite a lot of tension in this moment. And again, too, like, there's just so many different stories happening at once. Like, it couldn't just be a Cazimi, could it? No, we had to have this perfected T-square and an almost full moon, and God knows whatever else I haven't noticed looking at this chart yet. It's
and also to mention, we've got the moon here at 17 degrees as well, as it comes into full illumination of that, full moon. But this is between Venus and the moon. This is a 150-degree angle of a quincunx, which is an it's like they can't see each other, but there's something playing out here, and it's awkward. It's weird, and it's like, oh fuck, what the hell is that going on? It's like, the blind spot in when you're driving, like you can't quite see it, but you can sense something is happening there. And it's also the moon is forming back as a trine back to this Jupiter and Mars over here. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's like, do I like this, or this feels awkward? This is, it feels very chaotic energy coming into this full moon. Like, and a full moon, like in Aquarius, it's collective, it's energetic, it's like, it's a bit bounded, but it's breaking through boundaries. It's like, oh, it just feels, just looking at this chart, like it's starting to look like a bit of a scrambled mess out there in the world. And I think maybe being in a full moon in Aquarius, maybe this is a good time to be with a group of friends and just be together and do the crazy dancing in the lounge room or something like that, but do it together. So you all just go, oh, good, we're all here. It's okay. Oh.
Well, let's open this chart of the full moon in Aquarius so that we can have a look at where that changes and where it doesn't. But yes, it's like embracing that Aquarian weirdness, and letting that be an outlet. Not, I think that in times of tension, it can be really easy to feel isolated or othered or fringed. And I think the more that you can run with that and embrace it, the better. And that's a really good, it's a really nice thing to be contemplating and receiving under an Aquarian full moon, particularly when Mercury is, retrograde and has just leaving that heart of the sun position.
Yeah, so full moon, a moon ruled by Saturn and Uranus together. And it's really interesting. And I'm not sure whether I mentioned this yet, because, it's been many days since we've been doing this. But at the moment, if you were to look at Saturn from an Earth's point of view through a telescope, from an Earth's point of view, it seems like the rings of Saturn are disappearing, which is really interesting. So, on an energetic point of view, this feels like this moon falling in, you know, Uranus and Saturn's sort of sign. It feels just coming from that point of view that Saturn's rings are disappearing. It's like all of a sudden there's energy, like Uranus has more right away here because it's able to move through the bounds of Saturn that creates those boundaries between the inner planets and the outer planets. So it feels like there's information being projected through where they wouldn't normally. So this disappearing of Saturn rings happen every 13 to 16 years. So it's a cyclical optical illusion from Earth, just how the Saturn's tilt and where the sun's shining. But it also makes Saturn's moons more exposed as well. So there's something here, I think, where Uranus's information is able to more freely pass through the bounds of Saturn to us here on Earth. And it feels like it when you look at the chart, Uranus is chaotic as fuck. It's like sudden changes. It's here, it's there, it's lightning, it's movement. It's like you don't know where it's going to end up. And I feel that this full moon is a reflection of that chaoticness that Uranus is bringing through the bounds of Saturn, because it's more freely being able to move through it. So it's just really interesting just to take note of that.
That's amazing. And I think that it makes so much sense within the configuration that we've talked about before of Pluto at very early Aquarius, late Capricorn, Neptune at very late Pisces, Uranus at very late Taurus, that they're perfecting this little point, these sextiles between each other. And that they've been within orb of each other like that for months and months at this point. And so we've talked about these stories from those big outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that they're typically beyond the realm of Saturn, and Saturn holds the boundary of the earthly and the human realm. And that's usually a boundary that's maintained, but there's so many different configurations and things happening that are, allowing those energies to, pass through otherwise impermeable barriers. And like some of those things as humans will recognize and be like, oh, that's a weird little tingly, I wonder what that's about, and we can explore it and sit with it and lean into it. And then other times we'll just feel anxious and not know why. Other times we'll just be getting a week of shit sleep and not know why. Like there's lots of different ways that very subtle frequencies or background things can affect us in ways that we have zero conscious connection to. And so when the moon gets involved like this, it really, again, it brings it to the forefront, and especially a full moon, like it's really, and within 4 minutes of that square of Uranus, like that, again, like that's as perfect as an aspect gets. So yeah, it again, it's really illuminating and showing us, like, don't forget there's extra little bolts of electricity running through our nervous systems. Act accordingly. Like we don't always have to understand or make medicine of it. Sometimes it's just enough to be like, yeah, I'm feeling that electricity. Act accordingly, like stay hydrated, good sleep, all of that boring stuff that we know that we need to do, but also things that people with lots of Aquarian energy can forget about too. Like they can forget about their earthly day-to-day vessel because they're caught up in the grander schemes and the grander pictures and the future thinking of things. Saturn and in that Aquarian framework is very future oriented and wants the future now. It wants to make things better now. It wants to clear things out of the way so we can move forward. And it can be really easy to forget our needs in the moment when that happens. And so really good medicine for people with lots of Aquarian placements, or even just when we're experiencing an Aquarian transit like a full moon, is like, yeah, like me, did you forget to have breakfast this morning and then have 2 cookies at 10:30 a.m.? Yes. Yes, that is what I did today. So
Especially
it's
with Uranus and Taurus, this stable bull who just likes to plod along on the earth has had Uranus going through it for the last 3 years. It's not stable. Like Earth is not stable here. Like Uranus is just shaking things up. So, yeah, if you're feeling just really unsettled and anxious, or everything feels like you don't know where, I don't know. I woke up the other morning at 3 o'clock in the morning and I literally felt everything moving. It was such a weird experience and nothing felt solid, like that kind of feeling. Like, yeah, that's sort of the times. Like, and especially, we've been talking about this for months and months now. Saturn in Pisces, it's unbounded. The Lord of Time is unbounded. So it's like glitches and time glitches. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed really weird glitches where people are just standing still and not moving.
That may be unique to your experience, but what I'm experiencing is that I can't have any semblance of a routine or a schedule. Like time is just like it's not allowed to be organized for me.
No.
I'm trying so hard, and I'm like, right, this week I'm really going to do that thing. I'm really going to do that thing, and the next thing I know, the week is over, and not only have I not done the thing, but I've contributed to the thing and made it worse. And so I'm experiencing it, but in a less visual sense, perhaps.
My office works, and this old lady, she was just standing there, and Libby's like, what's going on there? And I was like, I don't know. She was just, I don't know what was happening. And it happened twice in the same, like within half an hour, that people were just doing weird stuff. And you just go, wow, I don't even know what's going on here. And I've heard other people say stories of rocking up to supermarkets at like peak hour at 4:30 and no one there. Like weird shit. Like, yeah, these are the times that people like, this is a part of this movement of whatever is happening at the moment. These are the times, and it's like it's Aquarius. It is a bit wacky and out there and weird and wild. And it's just like it's really interesting. And the fact that Aquarius is fixed air, like this static energy of movement. But with Uranus here, it's warpy. It's just real. It is a chaotic energy happening here. So this mid-August is, don't be surprised if you're looking out on the outside world and looking at the news or whatever, and like all hell is breaking loose out there. That's okay. Maybe not okay, but it's okay of the times. It is of the times, that's just go, okay, well, yeah, that's sort of that expect the unexpected, which is Uranus and Aquarius. But yeah, and just go, oh yeah, that I knew that was going to be chaotic. It's okay. This is of the times. This is all meant to happen this way, and which allows you to come out of it a bit and to ground yourself and just go, okay, I just breathe, come back to the, my body, and do all the things. And early April is the setup, or early August is the setup of all this. So because when we're in it, we don't get so swept up in it. Like this is like, if you know this in advance and it's going to be as chaotic as fuck at this full moon, you're going to expect it. Expect the unexpected. Okay. And then you can make plans now, because sometimes when you're in it, it's like you're being caught in a web, and you get caught and swept up in the chaos. And then that's tricky. But if you can sort of bring yourself out of it, and this is the gift of astrology, to go, okay, I can see this is going to be really wild. What is my contingency plan to set in now, and put it on your phone or make an alarm. So, you've got these things set up to go ping. Oh yeah, that's right. This is meant to be chaotic. It's okay. These of the times.
Yeah, schedule chaos into the calendar to mitigate the chaos happening around you. But no, I love that. And it made me think of this this term of suspending disbelief. And I don't know if that's something I've talked about before, but like every week I see something wild in the news or on social media, and often my first thought is, I can't believe that's like what is happening. And it actually doesn't serve, I think it's a natural reaction for a hot second, but it actually serves no one to be in a state of disbelief. And what I can hear, Yvonne, in what you're saying there is the best that we can do is to show up to it and weave it in as just part of what's happening in the world, and not to make it okay, and not to go, oh, well, but I think that if we hold this sense of disbelieving or our what the fuckness, that it actually only serves to keep us even further out of our bodies and makes it even more difficult to respond how we need to. And like, yeah, there's something about people who have studied history and who have studied the fall of empires are not surprised by what is happening in the world. And like a lot of us don't necessarily make a hobby of studying, past fallen empires, but the fact of the matter is that this has happened many times in human history before, and we're witnessing it now. And for a lot of us, a big part of what we need to do while we're here is just to witness that and to hold it and to do to throw ourselves behind making the world a better place at the same time. Yes, but sometimes all that we can do is witness and keep our hearts open and keep moving forward and encouraging others to do the same. And when we have so many big plot twists and stories unfolding all at once, and I think that this full moon, there's something about this full moon to me which is speaking less about any particular narrative, and it's more about illuminating just how much is going on, because at the same time we have this Jupiter-Saturn square perfecting, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but we did an entire 3-hour long episode on Jupiter's movement through Gemini. It's episode 2, and if you really want to hear, I think it was a solid 30 minutes that we talked about this square. The timestamp was 1 hour, 19 minutes and 23 seconds. So if you really want to listen to something in depth about this moment in time and that bigger Jupiter-Saturn square and that cycle, go have a look. But to me, this full moon feels like this moment of objectivity. Aquarius is super objective. To be able to step back and just look at the chaos and to see all the different things going on. And it's a moment to inform ourselves on how we want to proceed. What do we not want of this chaos coming forward? What can we acknowledge that this chaos is a part of a dying culture? And how can we contribute to compassionately midwifing the death throes that we're witnessing in the world, by choosing how to live our own day-to-day lives, and how we can participate in that in a way. Just how we can participate in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, goodness. Shall we talk about the Jupiter and Saturn square now, just briefly?
Let's do that.
Okay. So this is the first opening square. So Jupiter and Saturn met, if you cast your minds back to here, Australian Eastern Standard Time, on Christmas Day 2020. Was it 2020? 2020. Hang on, sorry. No, summer solstice 2020. Yeah, Christmas, almost Christmas Eve. So summer solstice 2020 was the conjunction. Okay, so that happened at 0 degrees. Was it 0 degrees Aquarius? Sorry, I haven't got my notes here properly.
I'm actually just opening my notes. Give me 1 second and I'll see if I can find it.
So this exact opening, so it's the reason why we call it an opening, because it's the first time they get to really see each other like this since summer solstice here in the Southern Hemisphere in 2020. So December 21st, 2020. And this is like it's like the circle is opening. It's equivalent to like a first quarter moon. We're starting to see the seeds of this, whatever was planted back at summer solstice in 2020, and are we liking it? Are we not? And this is where the square, so a square is a 90-degree angle, which we've mentioned before. And there's like a tension here. It's like, oh shit, I've planted those plants in the wrong place. They're not really growing as well. Oh yeah, they're growing really well, but maybe I need to water them some more. So it's like, we're not seeing the full picture yet of whatever happened back in December 2020. but we're starting to get a glimpse of it. And this is a time to, what do I need to do now to change something? So it's a very action orientated, and it can be, it's a square as a tension here in the 90-degree angle. So this is the first of three. The next one will be happening on Christmas Day this year in 2024. So be aware of that, especially when you're around family members. And then the last one, and this is wild to me, is on the 25th of May, 25. So next year, when Saturn is at 0. So Saturn will cross over the threshold between Pisces and Aquarius, and it will be meeting this square again. Saturn will be 0 degrees Aries, and Jupiter will be at 0 degrees Cancer on its final square of this series. So this feels like whatever's coming up now is I was gonna like, it's a part of the great demolition, I feel. And and the zero, when they finally meet for the last time in this square series before the full illumination, which will happen a few years afterwards, it's like, well, things have changed now. So this is the first of what we're seeing, really the demolition that's happening. The next square will be like, oh, fuck, that fell, and what still needs to be attended to in this square aspect. But then when they finally meet again for the last time next year, it'll be like, oh, what do we now need to build to ready for the full illumination of the Saturn and Jupiter opposition?
Do you know something super interesting I'd never thought of with that cycle so far is that when that cycle began and Jupiter and Saturn, they met in Capricorn, right? That conjunction, was it
I think so.
Capricorn or Aquarius?
I think it was very late Capricorn, maybe early Aquarius.
I think it was also, yeah, I have a feeling it was like Capricorn as well. But in Capricorn, it's Saturn ruled, but not only is it Saturn ruled, but Jupiter has its fall in Capricorn. So Saturn has immense power and Jupiter has less than normal power. So there's a massive unequal power dynamic when Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, and Saturn well and truly had the floor. Like that was up to Saturn to do whatever he wanted to do. And while these,
because what happened afterwards, like it was 2021,
yeah, so
what
all the
happened afterwards?
restrictions, all the rules, all of that, this is what everybody has to do, like this very patriarchy, Capricorn, like one-eyed view. And I am a Capricorn sun, I'm allowed to say this about Capricorn, that very like one-eyed view of like, this is where we all have to go and this is how we're all going to do it. And the way that rules and restrictions were implemented globally. But what I'm fascinated about is that by the time they have their final square, we have a flip in the power dynamic because Saturn in Aries is in its fall. Where Jupiter had its fall in Capricorn, this time Saturn will be in its fall, and Jupiter will be exalted in Cancer with that final square. So by the time that square formation is done, for this part of that cycle, and this is like what, a 35 more year cycle, right? Yeah, like 35 40 year cycle, that the power dynamic completely shifts, and Jupiter then has the upper hand. And so it really is a case of like, look back to 2020 and 2021 and what about that really like was not okay. And here, where do we hear the echoes of those restrictions being attempted to be worked over us again, that we're just not buying? Like, what stories were sold and bought back in 2020 and 2021, which are now generating tension and where we're at a crossroads and going, well, do I actually subscribe to what the overculture is telling me, like I maybe did or didn't those years ago? Or where was I questioning years ago that I'm not questioning anymore? And where do we have the opportunity to really grow through that with Jupiter, who will be, coming toward Cancer later next year, where there's the opportunity to really turn that into something else? And there's this yeah, something about the cold Saturnian dynamic of Capricorn and it needing to come into the nourishing heart of Cancer with Jupiter representing Cancer there. Yeah, I hope that isn't a little bit too far out of the bounds of this moment, but something about that really struck me as being really important in that. And again, like this is such a long game that we're playing, you know, what's happening in
Saturn.
the world now. Yeah, it's not just what's happening now. And that's where this full moon is such an opportunity, is to really step back and take that long view. And the thing is, where Capricorn's really useful, where Aquarius looks ahead, Capricorn remembers the past, for
Yeah.
better or worse, you know, and we don't want to stay enmeshed in the past and always do what we have done. But we do want to reflect back on that and decide what comes forward with us. And I think that this full moon really gives us an opportunity to step back and step out of our smaller day-to-day, week-to-week, even month-to-month cycles, and to see that bigger picture again. And to sort of bring that information then into the micro and go, okay, well, what does that look like in my day-to-day? And I really want to give an example of that, because I actually think that's really hard, is to look at those big cycles and be like, this is my life right now. I hate the world. I don't want to participate in the world. What do I do now? And quite often I'll just be like in an overwhelmed cycle of like not really doing anything because my nervous system is too fried to respond. And like I joke about it, but it's also, I think, quite a widespread feeling, and it's fun.
Absolutely.
It's not a nice way of being. And so I think that I think this is an example that's thrown around and kind of laughed at, but one of the things you can do is grow your own fucking vegetables. Like there's just, it sounds silly, but like honestly, when we think of like right use of resources and carbon footprint and getting dirt underneath your fingernails, which I have right now, it's so good. You know, like there's actually so many ways that we can choose to participate in the world differently and to make different decisions, and how can I make smaller decisions in my day-to-day, which will be gateways into bigger decisions that come later down the track, you know, like something people, I'm on a massive rant here, I'm so sorry, I will
No,
wrap
no,
this
I
up.
think this is really interesting because it feels like, you know, a lot of us felt back in December 2020, like there were some really big decisions being made around about that time of the compliance and what do we do. And, you know, there was a lot of from those decisions, you really had to come back to your core values and core beliefs, and coming back, you know, and come back to your core, which I think is what you're speaking of, like coming back to the earth and, you know, coming back to the core values of who you are and makes you who you are in this human body. You know, yeah, like growing your own, but do you value good food, you know, that you can just go into your garden? Do you value that? You know, and coming back to those core beliefs and values as a grounding in all this chaos. Sorry to take you off your tangent. I really was really enjoying it. I was really enjoying it. I just wanted to quickly say too, you know, reflecting back on 2020 and what was happening, don't be surprised that if, you know, we've been, you know, there's something here that we're going to have to, you know, not have to, but there's going to be maybe a revisit of complying to something that from authority or something like that, especially as it's happening in Aquarius, which is a collective sign. And that Saturn boundaries and Jupiter here, you know, having some restriction on that. But as we said, you know, Saturn's unbounded. You can't even see the fucking rings anymore. Like, you know, like there's something here that goes, there's something that could possibly come up that's a reflection on the 2020 from authority or top-down structures going, you have to do this to comply, blah, blah, blah. But we're just not going to buy it because we've learned that and what that looks like. That was pretty fucked. And, you know, with them now in a completely different position, you know, there's unboundedness here. Just goes, well, yeah, right. as if we're going to do that sort of thing. But don't be surprised if there's going to be some kind of trying of that during this time.
Yeah, and like, yeah, the particularly the COVID story
Mm.
was literally perfected under that Saturn Jupiter conjunction. And so don't be surprised, especially with Jupiter and Gemini here, like don't be surprised if there's literally new information surfacing. And like there's actually a lot of really great research coming out showing all kinds of different issues that there were with the vaccinations that they knew about and covered up. Like it's such a difficult thing because it was such a horrible time, but there's so much, and like no one reports it. There are amazing scientists and researchers who have like lost their jobs and their reputations and are doing this work like with very little funding and trying to bring the information up and out. And yeah, I wonder if, part of this next few years of the cycle after this square, if we're going to see more of that come out, because that Jupiterian truth and wanting to see what was actually there, and that the wisdom that can be mined from that experience as a whole.
Jupiter and Gemini too, which is all about communication. And what we've got here is, Mercury, the ruler of Jupiter, in the bounds of the sun. It's like something hidden coming out from the darkness. It's just like, ah, and Jupiter being able to now that Mercury's hidden, able to expand whatever happened here as well. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I just really briefly want to go back to that thing of like, how do we bring that change through? Like, this, I think that when I say grow your veggies, I don't mean like move out of your apartment and find a house in the suburbs with land or in the country with land. I mean like put some pots on your kitchen windowsill
Mm.
and grow some basil. Grow some spinach, like
Microgreens.
it can literally, yeah, just a handful of something that goes into your food. It connects you to your food more deeply. You find more gratitude for what you're putting into your body, which changes the way the food interacts with your body. I think that, one of the things with that for me is like, I want to step out of the consumer model of the world. I
Mm.
hate the model of consumption that we're very like pushed and forced into. And so I think that's why that grow your own veggie things comes up so often, is because it's one of the ways to, even if it's only accounting for 2% of what you typically consume, if everybody looked after 2% of their own stuff, that would have an alarming effect on the bigger companies that need that 2% for their profit margins.
Mm.
Like it's there's so many seemingly small things that pave the way. And like I often have people ask me, like, where do I start to make my own medicines as a naturopath? Like, I want to make my own herbal medicines. What can I do? Like, start by making your own apple cider vinegar. You put apple scraps in a jar and you cover them with water. The end. Apple cider vinegar 3 weeks later. That's it. Like you got to stir it. that's really, that's the extent of that. And once you have that body, that menstruum, you can start making all kinds of incredible things. I'm making a magnolia vinegar at the moment, and all that was the apple cider vinegar plonked on top of some magnolia flowers in a jar, did my best to pick out the bugs, put a lid on it, done. Like there's just, again, like that becomes a gateway for so much more. And this full moon really is like stepping back out of the bigness of everything and remembering that there are so many small things that you can do to change the way you interact with the overculture. And just like the frequency of the craziness in the world, and how you behave and what you do has an impact on others, and that radiates out as well. And I'm gonna
Yeah, no, I think, hey, just to carry on with your point, and just looking at here, Saturn and Pisces, Saturn's unbounded. So there's that authority figure, of responsibility, not there to tell you what to do, like, because it's unbounded, it's not even there. So this calls come back to that self-responsibility. What are you doing to be responsible for yourself? What are you doing to be responsible for your food? What are you being responsible for your warmth? Like, just your resources, Uranus and Taurus calling, there's changing of resources or where resources are coming from here. So that that stepping up to say, actually, no, I am my own authority. Fuck, I can do this and empower ourselves here for what's to come. When everything hits 0 degree points, like that's something new. And who knows what the landscape's going to look like there. It feels like that coming back to knowing where your food comes from, knowing where your community, coming back to community. Pisces, Aquarius, community, collective. Like, this is a full illumination of your community and who's in your community. Who's around you, your neighbors, the guy down the road who, I live in the country. So, we've got our farmer just up the road who does it. He, grows its own cattle and sells it locally. Know your local resources as well as yours. And maybe think, what can you contribute into your collective community in terms of food resources? Become a expert, plant some olive trees. Maybe you can be the olive person in your community. Like, think about that, of bringing things together in your local community. And this is where, and if you're not in a local community, reach out, like put a sign in your local shop window saying, I'm looking for somebody to grow. We can collect resources together. There's ways of doing it. But it's that self-responsibility to make that move in the first place is what's being called here, I think, too.
Yeah, and that was exactly where I wanted to take that next too, is I think that it's also really important to recognize that our nuclear family setup does not make it easy to do these things. It's fucked. And so I also know that, listening to this can actually sometimes be truly heartbreaking because we long to do these things. And like for me, I'm 38. Oh my God, I almost said 35. I'm 38. Time is bendy. I'm 38 years old, and it's only been the last 12 to 18 months that I've had a real garden and a veggie patch. And I've been a naturopath for 10 years, and this is the first time that I've really truly been able to commit to growing some medicinal herbs. Like, it hasn't come easy, and there's been different types of investments that's required of me. But we're not supposed to do it alone. I'm not supposed to grow 17 different types of vegetables to fill every need. I'm not supposed to grow every type of fruit tree so that my one family has all the types of fruit that we like. Like Yvonne said, it's like, I'll have the apple trees, you have the orange trees. And even though the lack of that community is devastating, and there can be huge barriers to finding that or to feeling connected or to having access, I invite everyone under this full moon. I'm going to do this as well because this is such an injury of my own, is to be flexible enough to assume that some of the boundary is you. And is your fear, or is your sense of isolation? There is a beautiful German word. I'm going to slaughter it, but I'm going to try it anyway. It's something like a Traurigkeit, and it's what happens when we feel so deeply lonely, but we isolate ourselves further as a result of that loneliness. And what that word actually means translates kind of directly to, I think it's wall builder sadness. And it's like when you're so sad and you retreat, and what you really need is to be held, but you build the walls even higher to hide behind in that isolation. And like that's a deep thing that I know I do for myself when I feel isolated from community. I'm a little bit of a hermit. I don't enjoy being social all the time. And so it's hard for me to upkeep this sense of being connected when I love to disconnect. But
that's a program too, isn't it? Like, we're being taught to do that. That's a fucking patriarchal program, and the patriarchal spell of the nuclear family. It is divide and conquer.
Yes, and that's just it. When we're all isolated in these households with the deeply generational belief that we should be able to do it, and that we should be able to be the perfect mother and bring money in and have the veggie garden and explode our own heads. Like, it's not supposed to be like that. And so, full permission to lean into how much of your separation from community is feeling separated from the community and isn't actually a separation. And this full moon in Aquarius, again, like that stepping back and going, what is this really? That's such a great retrograding thing happening here too. Like, because Leo is very about the self. So what in that Cazimi, that Mercury Cazimi, like what limiting beliefs do I have about myself which keep me separate, or which keep me believing that I have to provide it all and I need to be the shining light of everything? And how does this full moon tell us something different? How does the full moon go, well, actually that sense of self is true and real, but part of something bigger that we must also participate in, where everyone has a light that then contributes to, that's what the sky is, right? All the different lights. Yeah, wow, this full moon, I'm really curious to see what happens here now, because we've been talking about this for a long time.
I know. I just wanted to highlight a couple of more quick things. I
Yes.
think this is what Pluto in Aquarius is going to show us. You know, where in the life of the collective have we disconnected from ourselves from this, and what energies have played out to that divide and conquer? Because it's, you know, Pluto comes around and cleans out whatever sign it is and whatever house it is, and to reconnect us back to where the true sense or the lighter version of this. But you need to see the dank and what is blocking you from whatever the energy is of this particular sign, in this case Aquarius being the collective energy. But isn't it funny, and I just find this so funny, just so funny, that here we are talking about separation and division, when at the time of this conjunction back in December 22, that was what was fucking happening. We were told by authorities that were to stay in our house, to separate, to not even fucking look at people, to, like, you know, reporting where you're going so they can keep track of you, so you're not mingling with people. Like, you have to walk your dog between this hour and this hour. You can only do it by yourself. Like, that is, you know, that is the seeding of this square. And here we are going, well, that was fucked. Like, feel that, feel how fucking bad that was, right? Like, I'm still feeling the trauma from that. And it's not, by the way, that is not being acknowledged in our culture at all, of what the fuck happened in 2020 and 21, of the trauma that still lives in our body, still alive here. And it's pushed everybody's nervous system to the fucking edge, right? Like, you know, and let's look at this, because this is the, you know, we're getting this, we can actually start to see it now in this square. As I said, this is like a first quarter moon. We're starting to see the edges of it and just go, what the actual fuck? Okay, what is the antidote to whatever the fuck that was? And this is what we're speaking of. So I think this is actually what we will see, considering that we're speaking of it and the settings of it. It's just really interesting how this conversation has happened and unfolded to bring this. And Mars here is, you know, Mars is right next to, it's involved here. Like, we say in July it was all about Mars. Well, Mars is still playing here. It's still in the game. And, you know, there's, you know, don't be surprised. And I'm hearing it in my system as I'm speaking, fucking anger and rage coming up of whatever happened back then, because that was fucked. So fucked that my child, who was 12 at the time, did not want to live on the earth anymore because of the isolation she was feeling. Like, what?
Yeah.
Be rageful about that. Like, and what do you do to go, you know, to move it, and to, you know, there's a square, there's an action here that's calling something for movement, and so is Mars. So what do we do now, knowing that that was so bad? Yeah. Connect.
And I think I think too, and like, first of all, like I hear you, and, you know, you're speaking for me in those words and that experience, and to take a completely, like, another view of that, something else that time did was that it gave people an insight into how people who are severely health compromised or who are disabled, how they live every day.
That is true,
Because
yes.
society and our communities don't pull them in because they're not resourced, because they are permanently fringed and isolated, and that was just their life. Not to speak for everybody, but I have a few friends who are disabled by different types of conditions who, after the first 6 months, they were just like, Beck, this is just my life. This is just my life going on as normal, but now everybody else is doing it too. And even though I fully believe that the way it unfolded is not the way it should have unfolded, it also just highlighted the absolute lack of resourcing and compassion for people who needed to make a choice to do that, or for people who do that all of the time. And I'm feeling like my words are starting to not come the way I want to, but I just really, really want to speak for the people who needed that isolation and who needed to sort of sequester themselves away, but also just, I know in the full body of myself that there's a better way than that. And that it's only because of the way our overculture is set up to prioritize the earners and the consumers and the productive, for those listening on audio, the big inverted flying quotation marks here, to only prioritize the producing members of society, and that just highlighted that even more deeply. So again, there is such an opportunity in this illuminating moment and in this opening square with Saturn and Jupiter and with Mars there too, to feel the rage of how things are, and that rage carries us into action and change. Action is also a Mars keyword. It's not just the rage, like the rage takes you to a place of action, and sometimes that's where our decision making has to come from.
Yep.
Oh, all right. Big gosh, yeah. And
just say it's a really, really big full moon. And, and this could be the biggest full moon of the year. And because there's just a lot of chaotic, a lot of energy, a lot of tension, a lot of reviewing, and Mercury's hidden. Like it's a lot going on. And I really think that, plan something that you really love with your friends around this time.
Yeah. And also, like, just the last little point I'm going to make is like, when Yvonne and I are reading a chart like this, like there are so many different layers that have been opened, and this is not all going to come crashing down on you at this full moon.
No.
But again, it's that thing of what will happen, hopefully, is the invitation into the objectivity to also get a grander view of, for you, what these experiences have been with. And what we're talking about may not resonate at all. You might have a completely different version of what happened there and what was good or not good about that. The point is the view, and what we've just done is an example of what I hope it allows others to see and to step into as well.
I think also I just wanted to, this is a really good time to give some gratitude. Gratitude for what you have, for the people around you, for the earth below your feet, for, come back to that simple beauty of, and also here on this land, this midheaven here is in Taurus, what's fully illuminated in, it's just like, allow the earth to speak to you, look at what the gratitude of what is, here and now, and bring yourself back to that. Feels like a really good thing. And while we're speaking of gratitude, I just wanted to shout out to our Patreon members, and deep gratitude to you for showing up and sending your love, and to being a part of this amazing community that is the Sentient Sky podcast. And just a deep bow to our Patreons who've signed up, both non-paying and paying, especially the paying ones. Thank you so much. It means so much to us that we can, it feels good to come and do this, as this beautiful exchange that takes us away from our families and our lives, and share this information. So, and if you're wanting to show your gratitude to us in the ways of financial exchange, we would be deeply grateful of that. And all is welcome. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And so far, though, that generous support has meant that very little of this we've had to pay for out of our own pockets. And we do, like, we
Yeah.
have to contribute to that, but it's really helped us create something that we do for free that takes a lot of time to not also have that big financial expense at the same time makes it so much easier to step into an offer of ourselves. So truly, thank you. It's really, really humbling and such a privilege to have the support to keep on doing this work.
Yeah.
So we have 2 charts left. I actually need to finish this very soon.
Yes.
So what I'm thinking is this is the 23rd of August of at 1:18 p.m. AEST, and it's Venus squaring Mars. That it's also when the sun ingresses into Virgo. Yvonne, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling to just like do a 60-second cap of what this is and move into the last chart. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think we've covered the main cracks of what August is bringing, but Venus.
I think it's covered.
Okay, so after the conversation with Mercury, Venus, the sun is now moved into Virgo. Virgo is mutable earth. It's the priestess. She's showing up in service and health, and how can she be in this body and move with the times? Like, I feel like that's exactly where we got just then after that little spill. But Venus is here too, so she's organizing the information with love, and she's doing a spring clean, I think, here in the Southern Hemisphere. We're moving into past that Imbolc stage, budding, there's things that need to be moved and cleared out, especially after that full moon. And just going, okay, what is left now and what needs to be cleaned up after whatever happened in that full moon?
Yeah, very much so. And it really does, with Uranus being in Taurus, forever now, I think that the Virgo Earth really is such an opportunity to lean into something that would otherwise feel stable, that Uranus can destabilize at times. Like this, Virgo season feels like a beautiful time to really come back to the basic ways that we tend ourselves in our lives, because Virgo is very much about the routines of tending and the foundations that allow us to show up to our life to do the things that we need to do.
Yeah. And the moon's here in Aries too, that there's something, it's something fresh here. The moon is bringing this Aries spark and just going, oh wow, this sweep of inspiration to all of a sudden to clean out the house or that cupboard that you've been putting off for ages and ages. Like, this feels like a good time to go, right, it's time to move some shit out of the house.
Very much so. And with Venus being in Virgo too, the invitation to do it for beauty's sake and to do it the beauty way. Like maybe this is when you put Beethoven 6 on instead of during the chaos and do the chaos dance. Like, for me, Jethro Tull, whenever I've got to do a real deep clean of my house, that's what my mama did. I put Jethro Tull in and there'll be like 2 hours of rocking out to the flute and like prog rock drums and I get shit done. So like, put some music on that makes you feel like you're skipping through the fields, like Jethro Tull, and just get that the little mechanisms of life clean and oiled and ready to go.
Yeah, and it feels like good medicine after the full moon. And medicine, Virgo is all about earth medicine as well, as we talk about the herbs before.
So much so. And for the Southern Hemisphere perspective, Virgo season is that late winter creeping into early spring. And even though that doesn't fit with the typical seasonal model of explaining the signs, it makes so much sense to me that Virgo holds that space of like, what do I just need to do and get through at the very end of winter so that I can really move into spring and clear that dross out so that I'm thinking and feeling clearly? That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and because the weather is warming up finally, especially down here in the southern south, it's been quite cold. So this is a time to go, oh, I can feel the pull outside. What do I need to attend to before that happens inside? Yeah.
Yeah. very much so.
Yeah.
And so the last chart that we have to share with you is Venus's ingress into Libra. And we're sharing this chart partly because of that ingress of Venus moving out of Virgo, a place of difficulty for Venus. Virgo is in her in Virgo, she's in her fall, and she moves from there into her domicile, her home territory of Libra. But the other reason why we're sharing this chart is because we have another big formation happening here. And if you're looking at the video, you can see that there's a shape here that resembles a kite. So we have a grand trine happening in the middle, and then also Neptune acting as the focal point of this kite here in opposition to Venus. And so because this formation is happening so close to a sign boundary where, Venus and Pluto are at 0 degrees of air signs, whereas, for this to be a like quite powerful perfected formation, Uranus would need to be over the boundary and in Gemini as well. It's still a really potent configuration. And yeah, it's taking, so actually, do you want to jump in before I go into this any further? Is there
No,
anything
I'm
you
just
want?
thinking, and especially with the South Node here too, there's something quite significant unfolding here,
Yeah.
with these harmonious energies flowing from, the Lord of the underworld of Pluto going down to, Venus in her home sign was like, well, after all of that happens, what do we need to do? Venus is looking for companionship. She's coming into balance and right relationship. But there's, there could be stories here from the past or things, revisiting things with that South Node there as well. But there's changing happening, like, but, but it's not clear yet. Like it's really, really interesting, but it feels softer and gentler, and especially the Venus in the moon's bounds, Deacon in Libra as well. There's something here about, so what is actually really important in this dark moon of whatever that unfolded. You can see the moon coming closer to the sun here in preparation for that Virgo new moon. And Uranus is about to station retrograde. Pluto's about to move into Capricorn as well. So there's things slowing down, reviewing, changing, but it feels softer and gentler.
Yeah, it's quite a wild combination of energies in some ways. And I think what strikes me is that if you look at the heart of the configuration, which is Venus, Pluto, Uranus, Venus, Pluto, Uranus, Venus, Pluto, Venus, Pluto, Uranus. And like part of what happens with the trine is that like that cycling of energy, it's like a circuit that is connected and lit up. And it's only when one of the planets moves away that it disconnects and the song stops playing. So even though trines are harmonious and a beautiful, powerful, generative, particularly in the sense of creative energy, it can also really build and swell and be quite a lot of energy happening as well. And so when there is the addition of that planet of Neptune being opposite Venus, where it's very much like a bow and arrow where the energy is being pulled down toward Venus to launch out at that focal point of Neptune here. It's like, what is swirling and collecting around Venus at this time in her conversation with Pluto and Uranus and the South Node as well, that needs to be fired off towards something Neptunian. And so and the thing is too, like, as Yvonne was saying, like, this is a beautiful position of power for Venus to be in Libra. Like, Libra is about, harmonious relations, and particularly on a one-on-one level, but also in the greater sense as well. And I think that the whole world is really undergoing a masterclass in how to be fucking nice to each other, like how to have compassion for each other. Jesus Christ, friendos, like have some, where's your humanity? Like, and I think that like so much has to change for the world to remember their humanity, but I can really feel Venus really doing the hard work for that end, and like doing it willingly, like when a planet is near the South Node, that there are there's a spiritualizing and that like a corporeal, not quite embodied, more conceptual and abstracting sense of the planet. And when they move away from the South Node, it's like they find their form that can then give the action from what they've learned from the South Node. But there's this real willingness to disintegrate and come back to the values and the spirit, the true essence of a thing. Like Venus is really trying to pull the true essence of all the hard work happening with those outer planets. And she's really drawing and holding that to then fire it off out into the heavens towards Neptune. And we've talked about this in other episodes, but this feels like another moment of really like, what do you want to see in the world? What do you want to see? And how can you throw that prayer out there? But here, I wonder if the prayer is less intellectualized and less verbalized, and more theoretical or felt. There's something about, Libra being this area of justice and equality and of fairness. And, the whole point of that level of order and fairness is so that we can all be in harmony and get along, which is why Libra is one of Venus's homes. So what needs to disentangle and deteriorate for us to reimagine what that order and what that justice looks like? Because there's so much being rewritten here. And like the moment Venus comes out of Virgo, she's in orb of that South Node. That happens immediately. And this is your cue, Yvonne, to bring in Black Moon Lilith.
Black Moon Lilith. So I love Black Moon Lilith. I do Lilith. Oh God, what can you say? But Black Moon Lilith, she was the first wife of Adam. She would not be subservient to him. She was casted out the Garden of Eden and demonized. Black Moon Lilith here Black Moon Lilith is a point in the sky between the nodes. She's quite erratic. She moves quite, but this is the mean Black Moon Lilith. So this is the most accurate point if you take out her erraticness. So this is like the healed version of Black Moon Lilith here. Black Moon Lilith she's conjunct the South Node here. She's actually at 6 degrees. And in early September, along with Pluto moving into Capricorn, Uranus station direct, at this point, at 6 to 7 degrees where the South Node is, you're going to have Venus at 6 degrees, South Node 7 degrees, and Black Moon Lilith right here at 6 degrees as well. So it feels to me this building of energy of big opportunities for healing the past and what really feels, and bringing balance to the wounds of the past. And what feels very clear to me here is the witch wound and coming back to women who have been demonized and put on stakes and burned, and all that pain that's centered around whatever happened around the feminine around that time, thinking of the South Node and bringing some healing to it. I feel that what you said, Becky, about, Venus shooting out to Neptune here to dissolve the stories of the past and to bring in something new. This feels like a very, very important moment and information in this dark moon period to really release, these deeply bounded stories that have held us back of the feminine from the past, from her stepping into her power. And I think a lot of what came up around, I'm just feeling that now at this chart, it's funny when we do these charts because really we open up portals here. And so we experience as we're reading it, the energy around it. This is how we do it. It really feels like whatever came up at the full moon, we're able to come back here and really see things for what they are and just go, right, it's time to bring, coming back to justice, Libra, coming back to it really feels like the meeting of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and really seeing each other in that pain of the past and going, we need to come now together and make a new dream. Also to mention that Mercury is now stationed direct. At this point, it will move out of its shadow on the 12th of September. So there's something now, Mercury's coming in fresh now. He's gone through this underworld period. It's now like, well, what new stories now what old stories have we released and dissolved into the heart of the sun at that Cazimi, and during all that chaotic energy in the full moon? Now something can be rewritten, but from a place of healing, with that kite formation there.
Yeah, so much so. And when we can see so clearly in the world that our systems of justice are literally broken, they do not work. When a genocide can take place for almost 12 months with no end even in sight, when a felon can run for president of one of the most powerful seats in the world, it's pretty safe to say that the sense of the justice system and what is supposed to keep us safe is broken. And I really can feel the importance of Venus entering this place ready to dismantle and disentangle the absolute mess, which is the state of affairs of justice and order and the systems that are supposed to support community and keep people safe. When those systems are used to just outright murder and harm and displace, this is a really big moment. And Lilith is the person we need. Lilith is the part of ourselves we need. Like when I see, I think it's the Irish Prime Minister get fucking angry, that's the Lilith, and that makes me feel righteous in how and then we can all come into this sense of that's not okay, because that's what Lilith did. This is not okay. I will not submit to your version of how the world should be. And that's what we're all being asked, I think, to step up to at the moment. And this is really holding the signature of a moment of disentangling. And again, sad reminder, this is not the moment it all gets fixed.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not the moment it all starts to get better. The dissolving is the word I keep losing.
Yeah,
The dissolving
dissolving.
isn't pleasant. It
No.
doesn't feel good. It's a hot mess. And that's why things are such a mess, is because the shit is dissolving beneath our feet and no one has solid footing in that quicksand. But to surrender to it makes it easier. And yeah, it's not about getting to this point and having it be better. It's about getting to this point and being even clearer about what needs to happen to make it better, and to have better access to the resources like our sacred rage that is needed to do so.
Yeah. And just also looking at here, Mercury is now stationed direct. Over the next few days, it's going to come an exact trine energy back to this Chiron here at 23 degrees of Aries. It is that wounded healer coming out. It's like, what now that Mercury has got a new perspective? It's like, wow, right, what pains can we do here? Again, it really plays into that energy of that healing and what is coming up to be healed, to be that classic wounded healer. Chiron's a centaur. What story are you following them? What mythology? And I think we started at the very beginning of this podcast talking about the mythology, and this is where we begin to go, actually, we're going to write a new mythology here. We're going to make a new story here. But what do we need to do to dissolve the pains of the past and to look at them as well? And what needs to happen? How do you dispel? So, disengaging the spell that has been the patriarchy, knowing that Pluto, Becky just said, this is not where it all gets healed, but this is the start of the healing process. Because what we're going to see coming up in September, and we spoke about this before, Pluto is going to move in for its final hurrah in Capricorn. This Capricorn Pluto that has been unearthing and bringing up the root of the patriarchy, those top-down structures, you know, crumbling them down. And this is what I think we're seeing here. And this is so we're going to take this kite figuration of Venus going into the south node and, you know, dissolving and changing something and, you know, creating new stories and healing the past. But we're going to see it even more so when Pluto moves into Capricorn, just how much work needs to be done.
Yep.
You know, Capricorn, Saturn work, you know.
Very much so. And just as a last point, you know, the Libra new moon eclipse will be coming up a month from now, and Venus rules that eclipse because it's Libran, and Venus has rulership in Libra. So as Venus moves through the south node, we're getting a little idea of what that eclipse is going to bring. And so maybe this is a good moment to run through some of the things we're going to be talking about in September, which is, as Yvonne said, Pluto ingressing or retrograding back into Capricorn for a few months. We will have, we've got the Venus and South Node conjunction, which is beginning here, but perfecting later. We will have a Libra new moon eclipse and the spring equinox, but we also get the first partial Pisces eclipse, which will be that first little glimpse into what we will see when the nodes move out of the Aries Libra axis and into the Virgo Pisces one, either later this year or early next year. But it's just the first little, like the curtain kind of flutters open and you get a little sense of what's in there, and then it closes again and we won't see until, you know, several months later.
And those eclipses are going to be really interesting because the North Node is going to be moving over Neptune and Saturn. As Saturn and Neptune move, like it's like they tag each other on the way through. Like it's like
yeah.
And you know, we spoke about in July about the time spinner and things getting really weird and wacky. North Node, like the time spinner element, and Saturn, unbounded time in Pisces, and Neptune just dissolving fucking everything. Like this is it. This is, you know, you thought things were weird and wacky. You wait.
You thought shit was weird? Well, sisters, we have news for you.
And maybe it's a different type of weirdness, you know, but it's weird.
Totally.
And you just go, oh, you know, you talk about time glitches and weird things. Like it feels like it's going to come in even more prominent. So we get a first little glimpse into that behind the curtain.
Very much so. And I think, the very last thing I want to say here is, you know, one of the reasons why we're going through the process of healing and things aren't healed is also because both the benefics are busy with their own shit. Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, which is already leaving it a little bit under-resourced, but it's been dealing with Mars for a month. And we have Venus, who has just come out of Virgo, her place of fall, and runs straight into the South Node. Like, I said this earlier, they're benched this month, you know, and that's why we're doing the work of preparation for healing, and we're doing the best we can with the shit sandwich we've been passed. I always think of Maria when that comes up. We're doing the best that we can, but right now, the two benefics, the givers of grace and healing and wisdom and beauty, they're there and they're doing the thing, but they're very incapacitated to do that to the fullness that they usually can. And that's why we're doing the best that we can in the healing process, but it is not yet fully it's not healed, and it won't be for some time.
No, but at least we can start the work. That's it.
That
was a marathon.
A week long.
And thank you for those who are showing up and listening to us month after month. And we're getting some great feedback. If you are loving the work that we're doing and you want to see more of it, give us a thumbs up. We're on Apple podcasts, we're on YouTube, we're sort of putting it on our Patreon. Like, if you really want to follow us, sign up to our Patreon. But yeah, we'd love the thumbs up for the algorithms to get this work out there. This is a really important work. This gives people a guidance as to, when shit's getting real out there, they go, oh, fuck, that was in the astrology. They said this. Oh, okay. So you can sort of, take a step back and come back to that cosmic point of view. It helps us navigate the terrain. This is like the map that we speak of. So yeah, thumbs up. Tell us in the comments what you like about, your experience. We'd love to hear if you can jump back on. I know it's probably not going to be everything else, but yeah, tell us, your story in all of this. We'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Reading the comments and the feedback is always such good fuel to come back and to reflect, and for us to learn too of like what's landing, what didn't, like what's feeling really, pivotal. And yeah, it's such a beautiful community that we're building. Thank you all. And we look forward to, or is there anything actually that you wanted to share that you're doing at the moment, Yvonne? I've got nothing to share at the moment. I've got I need to do the things, and I will come back to sharing next month.
Yes, so the great Mars and Uranus blowout of computer is still unfolding here, but in saying that, I will be starting a new temple, invoking Inanna, so Venus, technically journeying with Venus through the underworld. So that is beginning on the 20th of August, so in a couple of weeks. And what's coming up for that, this is really interesting, it plays in the astrology so well, is the mother wound. We are journeying with Mother Bear, and the call to look at the mother wound has really come up for me in the last few weeks, which is a part of all of that we've just spoke about. This is my version of it. And so that is going to be very dominant. So if you want to work with a collective of sisters through the mother wound over the next 5 months and really sort some big shit out, come and join us. You can jump onto my Instagram at Yvonne Wildheart. My website's a schmozzle, so I won't direct you there, but go to my Instagram. That's probably the best. Or you can go to the Temple of Inanna on Instagram as well. Also, my hope is this week to get out the Temple of New Wheat, which is an astrological study group that I run, Patreon. So it's another Patreon, but that will have there a membership where you can come and join a collective conversation about all the transits. And with that, you get access to a monthly circle where you could have your chart read. And just join a group of sisters who are all there sharing their experiences, their lived experience and embodied experience with the astrology. And we do moon prayers and things like that and hold each other through whatever's happening in the skies. And we share notes and photos, and it's really beautiful space. So hopefully that will be up and running by the time this is released. So again, jump onto my Instagram at Yvonne Wildheart, all one word, to find out more.
That really is the best way to learn, though.
Yeah.
Learn as well as what I meant to say. Yeah.
With embodiment.
Like-minded community. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to us. It's been such a pleasure reading the skies for you all, and we look forward to connecting with you between now and next month.
Yeah. Good luck out there. Keep grounded. We love you. Thank you very much. Have a great August. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Sentient Sky. Follow us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thesentientsky for episode updates, our contact info, events and offerings, and to connect with us and our co-created community. Thank you so much to each and every patron for their support and presence within that community.
Deep gratitude to our ancestors, guides, and to the green world of the earth and the cosmic sky. May we ever be acting in service to the highest good of all beings. We pay our deepest respect to the First Nations people and to the elders past, present and emerging, to the Boonwurrung and the Djurrurrung country people. We give great thanks to the continuing connection to the land, sky, sea and their communities. We also like to express our deepest of gratitudes to our own ancestors and to the land, sea and sky of their origins. Both of us would like to thank our teachers, families, friends, and communities that support us and inspire us in this cosmic work. Especially big love to our beautiful children for whom this is ultimately for.
Great thanks to my brother, Daniel Van Horsen, for allowing us to use his original music, whom you can find on Facebook for details on his offerings as a session musician and sound engineer. Until next time, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Much love. Bye.